Marvel's master of multiversal magic. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 576 Holding a Warship, soaring through the stars, there is no one like me in this world. What's going on? What happened to our warships? Outside the island, all the warships bearing the behemoth insignia began to tremble slowly under George's power, gradually rising from the sea. No way, how could his power be so monstrous? Gade rushed out of the conference room, stood on the deck, and looked down, discovering that his warship and all the other warships had simultaneously risen and flown towards the royal palace in the center of the island. The warships of the Altung, the Fish Dragon Society, and the Debt Collectors, which were lingering nearby, were unaffected. However, the leaders of the various factions on the warships were also deeply shocked as they watched the behemoth warships fly towards the center of the island. Zhuang, the temporary worker of Altung, also known as Phantom by outsiders, had already infiltrated the behemoth system. Every device equipped by a behemoth gene warrior served as Zhuang's eyes and ears. To unite the various factions against behemoth, Zhuang had pulled everyone from each faction into a group to share intelligence. Therefore, everything that happened in front of the royal palace was naturally seen by all the major factions. They knew that behemoth's warships flying towards the center of the island was due to the abilities of the new King Nathan in the royal palace. However, this ability was far too monstrous in their eyes. Behemoth's warships each had a full load displacement of 20,000 to 30,000 tons, with the largest flagship reaching 50,000 tons. A dozen or so warships, totaling 500,000 to 600,000 tons, just lifted and flown away. Wasn't that terrifying? Putting aside everything else, just lifting those dozen or so warships to a certain height and dropping them on people would kill a large number of them. Even in the world of superhumans, few could withstand a single blow. Now they needed to reassess the new King Nathan's strength. The new King Nathan alone, not even including the Nathan Guard and the Islanders, was unmatched by any other power or nation in the world. How could they possibly fight against him? If he could control a dozen warships to fly so far away, then tanks, artillery, fighter jets, and all other modern weaponry would be utterly useless. Even if you used nuclear weapons at all costs, they could simply return them to their original state. How could they possibly fight against that? The key is that this person not only controls metal, but also seems to possess magical abilities. A single spell, seemingly related to gravity, instantly suppressed so many of the world's top superhumans, rendering them kneeling on the ground, unable to rise. Assassination by these top superhumans is completely impossible. Holy crap! Holy crap! Holy crap! Holy crap! In front of the palace gates, Zhang Jiulin watched as over a dozen behemoth warships descended from the sky, repeatedly exclaiming in amazement. Brother Jin is awesome. Brother Jin is awesome. Brother Jin is awesome. Actually, when the magic circle appeared, he and Feng Bao and the other temporary workers weren't affected by the gravity. He knew Brother Jin must have given them extra treatment. However, seeing others affected, he pretended to be affected and kneeled on the ground to avoid being discovered. It's just that I'm uncultured. One holy crap is all I need. 1,000 words can't express it all, but this one is the most dashing. Feng Bao, lying on the ground with her butt sticking up, heard Zhang Jiulin and Wang Zhangqiu constantly exclaiming holy crap. She cleverly used her distinctive Sichuan accent to recite a poem for the group. Oh my god, wow. As soon as Feng Bao finished reciting the poem, Zhang Jiulin let out a super loud exclamation, so loud it almost cracked. He had been whispering his exclamation just moments before, afraid of being discovered, but now he didn't care about being noticed by others. Because at this moment, everyone else was in the same boat, completely oblivious to why the soldier next to them was speaking a different language. They knelt on the ground, heads tilted back, eyes wide, their gaze shifting from the warship to George's. They were spouting profanities from their respective homelands. What did they see? They saw the warship stop above the palace, and King Nathan slowly rose from his throne, flew into the air, and his body rapidly expanded. In the blink of an eye, he transformed into a giant tens of thousands of meters tall. Then, The giant grabbed a warship, aimed at the sun, and with a burst of power, hurled it away. After throwing them, he grabbed the other warships and tossed them all away in the same way. With the warships in hand, soaring through the stars, no one in this world is like me. George looked at the dozen or so warships that had turned into black dots, nodded in satisfaction, and returned to his normal size, sitting back on his throne. With his size and strength, plus the aid of magic and abilities, those dozen or so warships wouldn't be slower than a rocket launcher flying off Earth, and they would definitely make it out of the planet. As for whether the warships would remain intact after leaving Earth, or whether the people on board would survive, that was none of his concern. His purpose was to give Behemoth a small shock, and then to intimidate the other major powers in this world, letting them know the difference in strength. Now, I'll ask you again, what are you here for? With a wave of his hand, dispelling the gravity magic, George smiled and looked at Ron below. Cold sweat dripped down Ron's face like a waterfall. He didn't get up, although the gravity magic was no longer pressing down on him, his legs were already weak with fear. This is terrifying, absolutely terrifying. This new King Nathan is truly terrifying. Gade and those experts are definitely doomed, and if he doesn't answer well, he'll probably follow in Gade's footsteps. In the end, only the warship carrying the market, the amusement park, and the hero Sean, which returned to headquarters early, will survive. Ron trembled, trying to force his way into the power of the divine tree under the guise of spreading civilization. Your Majesty King Nathan, it's all our fault. We were overconfident, shameless, and hypocritical, trying to seize the power of the divine tree under the pretense of spreading civilization. We hope you can forgive us. When we return, I will make sure the company provides you with a satisfactory reward. Behemoth is willing to provide all the resources of Nathan Island for free in the future, Ron replied to George above with a fawning smile, his whole body trembling. George laughed heartily upon hearing this, rose from his throne, and walked down. When he passed the hyenas and the others, they froze, too afraid to move. I don't care about the resources you provide, so you don't deserve forgiveness. George stood in front of Ron, touched his forehead, and a green killing curse entered Ron's body. Ron immediately turned into a wisp of green smoke and disappeared into the world. Then he looked at the bewildered Gene warriors in front of him. You have half an hour to leave the island. Whether you swim back or whatever, if you're still on the island in half an hour, you'll end up like him. Chapter 577 This is what a king should look like. Yes, without a word, the hyenas standing on the steps rushed off the island at top speed. New Nathan King was too terrifying, they were no match for him. Besides, Ron was dead, and the explosive device in his brain had been removed by Upside Down. So, it was better to take this opportunity to completely break away from Behemoth. With his strength, many forces would be willing to accept him, there was no need to continue serving Behemoth. Seeing the strongest hyena run away, the others naturally didn't hesitate any longer and took off running off the island. They needed to escape this terrifying place first. Behemoth's soldiers fled, and the other superhumans disguised as soldiers didn't dare linger either, joining the rush off the island. The mission to destroy the divine tree was impossible to complete. Behemoth suffered even greater losses and couldn't obtain the divine tree anyway. So, their goal had been indirectly achieved. The ultimate purpose of destroying the divine tree was to prevent Behemoth from using its power to cause trouble after obtaining it. If they didn't leave now, they might be mistaken for Behemoth's men and killed by the new King of Nathan, which would be a laughingstock. Zangchulin and the others shared the same thought. Although they knew George recognized them and had given them extra care, it wasn't appropriate to greet him at this time. So, like everyone else, they prepared to turn and leave the island. The Nathan's warship was still waiting to meet them outside the island. However, they had only taken a few steps when a magic circle suddenly appeared beneath their feet, and they vanished from the spot. Your Majesty, I want to join in Nathan Island and become a Nathan Guard. Seeing Behemoth's soldiers flee, White, who was standing in Nathan Guard, suddenly walked up to George and knelt down with a pious expression. He had practiced black magic for so many years, always believing that ordinary people without power were inferior, and that he should lead wizards to rule ordinary people, not assimilate into their world. Until he was defeated by his good friend Tabor and ordinary people using firearms, breaking through his defenses, he became disheartened and felt that life had no meaning. But today, on Nathan Island, under King Nathan, he saw what true power was. What army, what firearms, what armed helicopters and warships, everything was utterly useless before King Nathan. Before absolute power, any weapon crafted by inferior beings was a joke. Furthermore, Nathan Island had no inferior beings, all its inhabitants possessed abilities, aligning with his beliefs. Therefore, he decided to wholeheartedly join in Nathan Island, taking the king as his role model and living by his faith. Good, I can sense your heart. Then you will be Nathan Island's 10th Nathan Guardian. George placed his hand on White's forehead, channeling the power of the divine tree and transforming him into one of Nathan Island's guardians. Nathan Island could only have 9 Nathan Guardians because previous kings could only develop 9. Any more would be a burden. George, however, possessed power surpassing that of the divine tree, so if he wished, he could afford not only 9, but even 1,000 Nathan Guardians. White was, after all, one of the world's top experts. Subduing him as a Nathan Guardian would ensure the island's safety while he secluded himself. This was also why he didn't kill White immediately, letting him see how he handled firearms. Let's go back to the main hall. I have a few friends to see. After sealing White's position as Nathan's guard, George vanished, teleporting back to the main hall of the palace. The Nathan's guards, who, like everyone else, were still in a state of shock, disbelief, amazement, admiration, excitement, and exhilaration, finally reacted. One by one, they teleported back to the main hall. This is what a king should be like, thought Lee Mumu, the last former Nathan's guard who had disappeared with her grandfather, Lee Muxuan. She thought to herself how powerless she had been as Nathan's king, unable to even fight for Nathan Island's survival despite her own efforts. She had called various factions, but no one was willing to help stop Behemoth. She could only fight Behemoth to the death. However, after George became Nathan's king, he didn't need the power of the divine tree, nor did he need anyone's help. He could sweep away all invading forces and protect Nathan Island and the divine tree with his own strength. This was the true meaning of King Nathan's existence in her ideal. King Nathan wasn't someone who needed the Nathan guards and countless islanders to protect him at the cost of their lives. Rather, only those with the ability to protect Nathan Island and its inhabitants were qualified to be King Nathan. Zhang Julin, long time no see. How have you been lately? George appeared on the throne in the palace, waving to the still somewhat bewildered Zhang Julin. Upon seeing George, Zhang Julin immediately greeted him with a beaming smile. Oh, Brother Jin, long time no see. Thanks to you, I'm doing very well indeed. He was doing quite well now. After learning about Feng Baobao's background, he no longer needed to explore the secrets of the 36 thieves and the 8 extraordinary techniques. He could peacefully work for the company in his district, mediating conflicts between small groups of supernatural beings and arresting lawbreakers like the little Karami. Sometimes he didn't even need to lift a finger, just giving orders was enough for Baobao to perfectly complete the mission. His superiors were still familiar faces, Su San and Su Si, and the salary wasn't low. He spent his free time diligently cultivating and improving his strength. Even with the temporary workers from various regions joining forces again, coming to Nathan Island wasn't considered a particularly dangerous mission. Their task was to adapt to changing circumstances on the island, causing trouble for Behemoth when the opportunity arose, and immediately evacuating if danger wasn't present. Company warships were always on standby outside the island, and the newly joined Huge Quing and the other superhumans from Biao village were on board to provide support. You're capable, you're a smart man, you should know why I specifically kept you here, George smiled. Even without making a deal with him, someone with Zhang Julin's personality and intelligence wouldn't have a bad life. Zhang Julin's eyes darted around. Brother Jin, are you going to cooperate with the company? He wasn't the only one left behind, but several temporary workers. The intention was obvious. That's right. I heard about Nathan Island, so I came to see for myself. I didn't expect to accidentally become the new king of Nathan. Now that I'm king, I naturally have to consider Nathan Island's future, which is also a way to secure some benefits from my country. George waved his hand, and a row of chairs appeared in front of Zhang Julin and the others, with tea and snacks on them. Sit down and let's eat and chat. You've become King Nathan without even realizing it. You really didn't mean to, Zhang Julin muttered to himself, then sat down and started eating snacks as if they were old friends. The others followed suit. Except for Feng Baobao, who was also eating and drinking without a care in the world, the other 4 sat upright. They weren't familiar with George, and their recent experience made them afraid to make any sudden moves, lest they anger him. Chapter 578 Floating Nathan Island. Brother Jin, I can't make the decision myself, But I think the company would definitely be willing to cooperate with you. In Zhang Chulin's view, George's strength was definitely beyond the level of a nuclear bomb, and being a Chinese citizen, even without the identity of King Nathan, he would definitely be appeased and cherished. Now, representing Nathan Island in cooperation with the company, the benefits are too great. How could he not be willing? Just releasing the news of the cooperation between Nathan Company and Nathan Island would make other international forces look down on Nathan. No one wants to have a conflict with Nathan, only to have Nathan bring in George, this powerful figure with a flying warship. That's naturally good. The cooperation details are as follows. George nodded and began to briefly explain the cooperation details he had drawn up. In fact, the cooperation details were quite simple. First, all resources of Nathan Island would be provided by Nathan for free. Second, the islanders of Nathan Island could obtain legal status in China to study and work. As for whether they would work for Nathan or do some ordinary jobs, that would be up to the islanders themselves. Thirdly, if islanders commit crimes, they will be tried and prosecuted by Nathan Island. Fourthly, due to the cooperative relationship, Nathan Island can provide military support if Enacom needs to deal with any trouble. George can also personally help if necessary. Fifthly, although Nathan Island is not open to the public, if Enacom needs it, pregnant women can be sent to the island, and the children born will have their abilities developed by the divine tree, guaranteeing they will become extraordinary beings. Sixthly, Enacom can help promote the sale of slots for pregnant women to give birth on Nathan Island, and the traded items will be various cultivation techniques, Taoist methods, and magic. In this way, the islanders of Nathan Island will no longer have to live in isolation like primitive people, and can safely obtain the living conditions of modern people. They can also openly utilize Nathan Island's unique ability to produce extraordinary beings to trade with the world for different spells for research. He can simply stay on the island and collect all the cultivation techniques in the world, and then slowly go into seclusion to study them. Brother Jin, I will convey all of this to the company. I believe the senior management will respond soon. After listening to George's explanation of the cooperation, Zhang Chulin swallowed hard. He knew without a doubt that the company would agree. The talent of the superhumans was innate. Even if you're a high-ranking official in the country, if your son wasn't born with a superhuman, he would still be an ordinary person. But now it was different. As long as family members were sent to the island to give birth, there would definitely be superhuman offspring. He believed that no ordinary person in the world who knew of the existence of superhumans would not be tempted. And Natatuang, as a partner company, could send people to awaken unconditionally. This alone could offset all the previous requirements. Very good. Take this. After you make your decision, input a little key into it, and you can instantly teleport to the island. Discuss the details with Mumu. George flipped his hand, producing a token with the name of Nathan Island on it, and threw it to Zhang Chulin. Then he waved his hand again. And a special magic circle appeared beneath Zhang Chulin and the others, teleporting them directly to Nadatong's warship outside the island. Thank you, Your Majesty, for everything you've done for the islanders. After Zhang Chulin and the others left, Elijah knelt on one knee, his face filled with emotion. His greatest hope was that the children on the island could live happy and carefree lives like children outside, instead of living a primitive existence. The Nathan guards in the palace were alright, but the lives of many native islanders were no different from those of people in ancient times. They had little education, had never seen television, and might never have even tasted a piece of chocolate in their entire lives. The new king not only protected the divine tree and the island, and repelled the invaders, but also gave the islanders the opportunity to see the outside world. I don't deny your previous thoughts, but your methods were wrong. This world is always ruled by the strong. If you want to gain power, you must cultivate and improve your strength. George waved his hand dismissively. Half an hour has passed, and Nathan Island should hide now, sensing that there were no outsiders on the island, and even Ru and Feng, after finding inner peace, had quietly left. George's eyes gleamed with the golden light as he activated the power of the divine tree. Under the influence of King George of Nathan, the massive root system of the divine tree began to spread deeper into the island, gradually forming magic circles at its base. Rise! George pressed his hands to the ground, injecting terrifying magic into the earth, and the magic circles formed by the divine tree shone with dazzling golden light. The next second, the entire island trembled, then gradually rose from the sea, ascending into the clouds and disappearing without a trace. In the main world, George used the energy of the space stone to create a floating island as a school base. Now, using the power of the divine tree and his own magic, he had transformed Nathan Island into a floating island as well. From then on, Nathan Island would truly disappear, floating high in the sky, unknown to anyone. The only way to enter and exit Nathan Island was through the key created by George. Just who is this new king of Nathan Island? The various aliens returning to their respective warships watched as Nathan Island rose from the sea and vanished from their sight, their mouths trembling with shock once again. The following day, Zhang Julin, Feng Bao, and Zhao Fengsa from the company's board of directors used the token issued by George to enter Nathan Island in the sky, carrying the cooperation agreement. Clearly, after a night of meetings, Nathan had readily agreed to George's terms. George didn't concern himself with the details, leaving them to Lee Mumu, Elijah, and Elena. He himself went to find Lee Myuxun, as his agreement with Lu Jin was still unfulfilled. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Lee Myuxun, seeing George suddenly appear before him, showed a rare display of respect. George's formidable strength displayed yesterday had deeply impressed even the arrogant Lee Myuxun. "Old Lee, someone made a deal with me before, asking me to help him find someone." George gestured for Lee Myuxun to sit down. "That person's name is Lu Jin." Lu Jin. Lee Myuxun's pupils contracted instantly. This name instantly reminded him of everything before he came to Nathan Island, and he couldn't help but mutter, "I've fallen to this state because of my arrogance. Is this damned god deliberately punishing me? Even after hiding in this place, I still can't sever the karmic ties from back then." "Old Lee, you are Mumu's grandfather, and also a resident of Nathan Island. Don't worry, my deal with Lu Jin was just to find you, not to kill you. I know your situation. Go see Lu Jin, and no matter what happens, I will save your life and bring you back to the island." George patted Lee Myuxun on the shoulder. Chapter 579 Withdrawal from Kwangsing. "I'm not afraid of death, I just don't know how to face him." "Forget it, this matter should have been resolved long ago. I've been running away, so let's grant his wish." Lee Myuxun sighed deeply. "Your Majesty, can you grant me a request?" "Speak." George nodded. Lee Myuxun looked dazed. "If Lu Jin ultimately wants to kill me, don't stop him. It's what I deserve." "No problem." George didn't object. He didn't comment on the rights and wrongs between Lee Myuxun and the Sanai sect. Many things in this world are complex, impossible to judge by a single standard, and some things don't even have a right or wrong, only perspective. He was just an outsider. If Lee Myuxun felt he was wrong back then he was wrong. If he was right, then he was right. He didn't care about those things, he was just fulfilling his deal with Lu Jin. If Lu Jin ultimately wanted to kill Lee Myuxun, then so be it. He could always save him afterward. Of course, he didn't save Lee Myuxun because he thought Lee Myuxun was right. However, Lee Myuxun was Lee Mumu's maternal grandfather, and Lee Mumu was the former Nazan Guard of Nazan Island, now the commander of the Nazan Guard, and his capable subordinate. Lee Myuxun was also quite capable, and could be recruited as the new Nazan Guard. "Alright, let's meet him then, and settle this matter once and for all." Lee Myuxun already had his own plan in mind. Upon hearing this, George teleported Lee Myuxun directly to the Royal Palace conference room. Seeing Lee Mumu and Zhao Fengsu still negotiating the details of the cooperation, he asked, "How did the talks go, Your Majesty?" "It's almost done, but there are still some details to discuss." Lee Mumu respectfully recounted the few issues that hadn't been resolved. George waved his hand. "Don't worry too much about these details, it's good enough." Lee Mumu was so concerned about the details because she knew that with George around, any problem could be solved. But when George grew old and died, the next king of Nazan Island wouldn't have George's strength. If the details weren't settled, that would be a problem. However, what she didn't know was that George wouldn't die of old age, he had already achieved immortality. So he didn't care about the details, all George wanted was for everyone to be on the same page. "Chairman Zhao, there's something I need to tell you. I'm planning to take old Lee to the Lu family." George gave a brief overview of Lee Myuxun and Lu Jin's situation. Zhao Fengsu immediately replied, "Your Majesty, if necessary, our company, Nadu Tong, can mediate. I believe old Master Lu is a man of great principle and won't pursue the matter too much." Lee Myuxun is Lee Mumu's maternal grandfather, essentially a member of Nathan Island. Jin Bao's decision to personally take Lee Myuxun to talk to Lu Jin was clearly to protect Lu Jin. If Lu Jin killed Lee Myuxun, It might anger Nathan Island and cause problems with the cooperation. This was something the company absolutely couldn't allow. That's why he suggested the company mediate first, and then have both parties meet amicably to resolve the conflict. Even if mediation failed and Lu Jin was unwilling, they would force him to agree. Normally, they wouldn't do this. Lu Jin was one of the 10 elders, and the Lu family had immense influence in the world of supernatural beings. The Lu family's reputation is undeniable. However, special circumstances call for special measures. If the company takes a hard line at all costs, even the old master will have to obey. Otherwise, Longhu Mountain will cease to exist. Lu Jin isn't alone, he has the entire Lu family, and they will ultimately heed the advice. No need. The company doesn't need to worry about this. Old Li plans to withdraw from Kwangsing and is willing to accept the test to settle everything. You just need to help spread the message throughout the supernatural world and organize things. Don't mention that Old Li is from Nathan Island, just follow the normal procedures. George waved his hand, declining Zhao Fengsu's offer. This involved his deal with Lu Jin. If he had to use force, he wouldn't need to bother Nathan, he could easily handle it himself. Li Muxun simply understood cause and effect and let things take their natural course. Withdraw from Kwangsing. Since that's the case, then we'll listen to the king. We'll definitely do a good job of notifying them and maintaining order this time. Seeing George's resolute tone, which didn't seem like mere politeness, Zhao Fengsu didn't say anything more. There's no such thing as leaving in the Kwangsing sect now, but in the past, if a member wanted to leave and return to the normal world of supernatural beings, there was a generally accepted method. First, the news would be released, giving everyone time to prepare. Then, a time and place would be chosen, with a highly respected notary present. Within 7 days of the chosen time and place, anyone, for any reason, could choose to participate in the withdrawal ceremony. The key point of this ceremony was simple. During those 7 days, any participant or witness could do anything to the person withdrawing. The withdrawing person had to accept any demands from the participants, including death. Therefore, very few who used this method survived. Most weren't trying to survive, but rather paying for their past sins. Let's set the time in 3 days, and the location is that small valley behind the Sanai Gate, Li Muxun said. Then let's set it like that. I'll take you to see Lu Jin first. George teleported Li Muxun to the Lu family's gate and then transmitted his voice to Lu Jin inside. Upon hearing the telepathic message, Lu Jin immediately activated the reverse life triple technique, smashed through the door, and rushed out. What's wrong, brother Lu? Are you going to make a move? Making a move now would be too easy on you. Killing you is a serious matter, I need to think it over carefully. Lu Jin took a deep breath and dispelled the reverse life triple technique. George said, Old Li has sent out a message that a ceremony for withdrawing from the Kwangsing sect will be held in the valley behind the former side of the Sanai sect in 3 days. If you want to kill him, you can wait until then. Withdraw from the Kwangsing sect? I didn't expect you to become so bold in your old age. Lu Jin stared intently into Li Muxun's eyes, his tone laced with sarcasm. Li Muxun wasn't angry at this. Instead, he laughed heartily, relieved. Mr. Jin, thank you for bringing Lu Jin here. Our deal is done. Come to the Lu family for tea anytime. You're always welcome. Lu Jin smiled as well, then turned to thank George, grabbed Li Muxun's hand, and pulled him into the house. Since you're going to die in 3 days, stay with me before you die and have a good chat. Then let's have a good chat. Li Muxun didn't resist, but said one last thing to George. Your Majesty, thank you for bringing me here. You can go back now, I'm fine here. Mr. Jin, what's going on? At this moment, Lu Linglong and her brother Lu Lin also ran out, completely confused by the conversation. You'll find out in a few days. George smiled and vanished from the spot in an instant. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 589 Dragons Pulling the Cart. 3 days later, in the valley behind the former side of the Trinity Gate. I don't know why the old man didn't choose the original side of the Trinity Gate, but chose this ravine behind it instead. We'll be staying here for 6 or 7 days. If it rains, there won't even be a place to take shelter from the rain, Su San complained to Zhang Chulin beside him while directing the employees of Nadu Tong to set up some tables, chairs, and food and drinks in the valley. Third brother, look at your jinx, it really rained. Zhang Jiulin touched a raindrop on his forehead and couldn't help but roll his eyes. Susie next to him asked doubtfully, the weather forecast clearly said there would be no rain today. When has the weather forecast ever been accurate? Zhang Jiulin turned his head to look for an umbrella and found that the clever Bayor had already fixed a plastic stool on her head, so he immediately followed suit and also put a plastic stool on his head. Third brother, the Kwangsing people are here too. Will they cause trouble? Squatting with Bayor, Zhang Jiulin watched as a large group of Kwangsing members entered the valley. A wary look crossed his face. This time, the Kwangsing members weren't small fry. There were veterans Xiao Liqing and Mei Jinfen, the weapon refiner Wan Tao, the corpse demon Tu Junfang, Ding Xian, one of the two heroes, and the four madmen Xiaohe, Shen Chong, Gao Ning, and Dao Mei. Many lesser-known figures were also present. The valley was now filled with people from various prestigious sects and families, many of whom harbored deep-seated hatred for some members of Kwangsing. They couldn't afford to be hostile. A fight could easily break out. Don't worry, they won't fight in this situation, Su San waved his hand, unconcerned. Although Kwangsing was a 1,000-year-old evil sect, it had its reasons for existing, and no one wanted it to disappear completely. If a fight broke out in the valley now, it would be a chaotic melee, resulting in countless deaths, something neither side wanted. Therefore, the leaders of various sects and families, along with the higher-ups of Kwangsing, tacitly agreed to discipline any disobedient individuals themselves. Furthermore, everyone knew that the main characters here were Li Muxun and Lu Jin. To fight here would be disrespectful to both of them, and also to the person in charge of the event, Nadu Tuong. Li Muxun was a veteran of Kwangsing, with only Xiao Liqing and Mei Jinfeng as his peers, even Wan Tao was a generation younger than him. Lu Jin, needless to say, was one of the 10 elders, second only to the old celestial master of Longhu Mountain in prestige, known as a true gentleman without flaws in his life. Therefore, there was no need to worry about a fight breaking out in the valley. Sure enough, upon seeing the Kwangsing members appear, the disciples of the various sects and families who had been watching the spectacle, though glaring angrily, did not utter a single word of provocation. The Kwangsing members were the same. They went to see Li Muxun, who was sitting in the center of the valley, exchanged a few words, and then found seats. Look! What's that in the sky? Just then, everyone suddenly heard a dragon's roar from the sky. Looking up, they were all startled and stood up. What did they see? They saw 9 golden, 5-clawed dragons appearing in the sky, pulling a huge chariot resembling the one ridden by an ancient emperor. The 9 dragons pulled the chariot, soaring through the clouds towards the valley, as if celestial beings had appeared. Disperse! A huge voice came from the chariot, powerful energy reverberating in the sky. The dark clouds immediately dispersed, and the sunlight shone down. Under the sunlight, those below could see even more clearly. The 9 golden dragons were indeed golden dragons, looking as if they were cast entirely from gold, yet imbued with life. The 9 golden dragons landed in the valley, and George emerged with a Nathan 10 guards. He had transformed Nathan Island into a transcendent place, so his processions naturally needed to be more impressive to deter troublemakers and avoid unnecessary problems. So instead of the easier teleportation, they used shape-shifting magic to create a 9-headed golden dragon. Adding mimicry and a spirit awakening spell, they crafted this incredibly cool and imposing vehicle, which flew down from Nathan Island. That's Jin Bao Bao. The rumors were true. He really became King Nathan and single-handedly destroyed Behemoth. Everyone immediately recognized Jin Bao Bao upon seeing him. The devastating blow to Behemoth's Nathan Island was a world-shaking event. 3 days was enough time for many domestic forces to obtain relevant intelligence. They thought Jin Bao Bao's ability to destroy the royal family was already terrifying, comparable to the old master. But his strength far exceeded expectations. He actually crippled Behemoth, transformed into a giant, and threw over a dozen warships into outer space. It was practically a myth. Many people felt this information was too exaggerated, wondering if the intelligence gatherers had eaten mushrooms or been under some kind of illusion. But now it seemed highly likely. 9 dragons pulling a chariot descending from the sky, wasn't that just like a myth? I never expected that the ceremony of leaving Kwangsing would attract the attention of Nathan Island as well. Everyone only knew that Jin Bao Bao had become the Nathan King, driven away Behemoth, and transformed into a giant to throw more than a dozen warships into outer space, but they didn't know that Li Muxun was also from Nathan Island. because in that great battle, George was the only one who stood out, and Lee Muxun and the Nathan Guards were just background figures. When the company sent out the message, they didn't mention that Lee Muxun was from Nathan Island. Brother Jin, you're here. Please sit here. A seat has been prepared for you." The shameless Zhang Chulin immediately went up to greet George in a very obsequious manner when he saw him appear. Acting as if they were very familiar and had a good relationship, he pulled George and the Nathan Guards to sit in a viewing spot he had specially prepared. "Thank you very much, Xiao Zhang. If you can't stay at the company in the future, you can bring Feng Bao to join in Nathan Island. I'll reserve 2 Nathan Guard positions for you." George knew that Zhang Chulin wanted to use his influence to intimidate those who might still have designs on his key source stream, paving the way for a future where Feng Bao's secret of immortality might be exposed. He didn't expose them, but instead secretly sent a message to Zhang Chulin. He admired Zhang Chulin's intelligence and shamelessness, as well as Feng Bao's strength. If the two of them joined Nathan Island, he could focus on his seclusion much more easily. "Brother Jin. That's a deal. You must reserve 2 positions for us." Zhang Chulin's eyes lit up immediately upon hearing this, and his expression became even more eager. He had always worried that one day Bao's immortality would be exposed, and even the company might not let them off the hook. If they could join in Nathan Island, with Jin Bao protecting them, even the company wouldn't dare to touch them again. Nathan Island is hidden in the sky. Even if you live there, you couldn't find it. The key point is that Jin Bao knows Bao's secret to immortality but doesn't care at all, because Jin Bao herself has already achieved immortality. Chapter 581. I'll beat you up if you pretend. For 5 days straight, no one bothered Lee Muxun. This was understandable. So many years had passed, and most of Lee Muxun's enemies from back then were either old or dead. Besides, Lee Muxun's nickname was the mischievous child, mainly referring to his fondness for playing tricks on others, not his actual wickedness. Aside from causing the destruction of the Sanai sect, he hadn't really killed anyone. Even those he had tricked were now old men, having seen through many things, and unlikely to be so petty as to seek revenge for being tricked. However, during these 5 days, the number of people in the valley didn't decrease. In fact, it increased. Many who came later weren't there to see Lee Muxun's withdrawal from the Kwangsing sect, but to see George and the legendary 9 Dragons carriage. Most of the young people didn't know Lee Muxun or the Sanai sect incident, so they hadn't come to watch. But when they learned about the 9 Dragons carriage and the events on Nathan Island, they were all like they'd been injected with adrenaline, rushing over in droves. Basically, most of the contestants from the Longhu Mountain Lu Ocean Grand Ceremony had arrived. The valley was densely packed with extraordinary individuals, making it the largest gathering of extraordinary people in the country, even surpassing the previous Lu Ocean Grand Ceremony. On the 6th day after the ceremony, someone finally arrived in the valley and approached Lee Muxun. Huguang Laoliu, whose wedding had been ruined by Lee Muxun, considered it a great humiliation. He demanded that Lee Muxun lick his shoes before letting him go, but when Lee Muxun tried to do so, he kicked him away, not truly humiliating him. It turned out he was just joking. He then told Lee Muxun that he had contacted everyone who had a grudge against him from years ago. Besides those who had passed away, many of the living didn't remember those small incidents from their youth, and those who did felt it was a waste of time to travel such a long distance for him. So, in the end, only he came. Only then did Lee Muxun realize that all these years he had been torturing himself, believing he had committed countless sins. In reality, this was nothing compared to someone's rich life experience spanning decades. On the evening of the 7th day, as the sun was about to set, Lu Jin stood up and approached Lee Muxun. The ceremony of withdrawing from the Kwangsing sect had reached its climax and conclusion. After confirming that no one would cause Lee Muxun further trouble, Lu Jin decisively engaged him in battle. The two exchanged blows, their fight incredibly intense. Lu Jin didn't use the Tongshan talisman, relying entirely on the reverse life triple technique. Lee Muxun, in turn, didn't hold back, unleashing his full power. Lee Muxun is a genius too. George, observing the battle, couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Lu Jin's strength was understandable. He had the guidance of the top expert Zhuo Ruotuang and practiced the renowned 3-1-6 reverse life triple technique. As for Lee Muxun, he had only learned the insignificant reversal of 8 directions, and his teacher was merely a third-rate expert in the world of supernatural beings. But through sheer talent, He cultivated this third-rate reversal of 8 directions technique to the level of a top-tier master, becoming evenly matched with Lu Jin. If Lee Muxun had successfully joined the Sanye sect back then, his achievements would undoubtedly be even greater. The crowd was also captivated by the intense battle between the two, secretly marveling at the worth of their trip. It's over. After a full hour of fierce fighting, under Lee Muxun's deliberate provocation, Lu Jin finally let go of everything, risking death and failure, to break through to the third level of the Reversal of Life trilogy. Upon entering the third level of Reversal of Life, Lu Jin's strength increased dramatically. His physical body was practically mortal, allowing him to decisively defeat Lee Muxun. At this point, George realized that Lee Muxun's purpose was to use Lu Jin's hatred for him to help him break through to the third level of Reversal of Life. It was also a way of making up for the debt owed from years ago. However, Lu Jin clearly didn't appreciate this, giving Lee Muxun a thorough beating until he was on the verge of death before stopping and having someone bring the hammer that signified the end of the ceremony. Lee Muxun, I'll give you a chance. As long as you promise me you'll never have anything to do with Guangxing again, including that bastard Wu Jinshen, then I'll personally strike the gong for your karmic reunion today, and you can participate in the reconstruction of the Sanai sect in the future. Although Lee Muxun was the cause of everything back then, it was Guangxing's leader, Wu Jinshen, who truly broke Zhuo Ruotong's reverse life triple realm, leading to Zhuo Ruotong's death and the destruction of the Sanai sect. Wu Jinshen disappeared back then, and there's still no trace of him. He might still be alive. He knows that letting Lee Muxun go today is letting himself go, and he can finally let go of his resentment, but Lee Muxun must agree to this condition. Otherwise, he can't forgive and forget Lee Muxun. Lee Muxun knelt on the ground, head bowed, blood gushing from his mouth. My purpose in this recruitment was to withdraw from the Guangxing sect, so naturally I wouldn't have anything to do with them anymore. But the sect leader is different. He's the only one who has devoted himself to us, this bunch of scum, to the Guangxing sect. To you, he's a great demon. To us, he's our saint, but your saint abandoned you and disappeared. Lu Jin was stunned for a moment upon hearing this, then roared. Lee Muxun nodded in agreement, so I want to find him. If I survive this time, I will find the sect leader and serve him as his disciple. Brother Lu, whether you're satisfied or not, this is my answer to you. Fine, fine, since this is your choice, then die. Lu Jin's face darkened, his fingers curled into a hook, and he viciously pierced Lee Muxun's temple, instantly killing him. Lee Muxun collapsed to the ground, lifeless. This scene stunned everyone present. In their minds, the seemingly flawless old master Lu Jin wouldn't actually kill Lee Muxun in the end. But reality proved otherwise. He brought it on himself. It's all for the best now. Only Wu Jinshen is left. Lu Jin stared at Lee Muxun's corpse, muttering to himself, his mind seemingly a little unstable. Grandpa, Lee Mumu, seeing Lee Muxun killed, immediately reddened her eyes and tried to rush over, but was stopped by George. It's alright, he can still be saved. With a flash, George was already in front of Lee Muxun's corpse, reaching out to press down on his head. Seeing George appear, Lu Jin seemed to be provoked and immediately punched George. Get out of here, who told you to touch him? However, the next second, Lu Jin, who had already broken through to the third level of reverse life and whose strength might rival that of the old celestial master, was easily sent flying 2 miles away by a casual wave of George's hand. It's fine to pretend with them, but pretending with me, I'll beat you up. Chapter 582 Marvel Parallel Universe. Come back. George used a soul-sealing spell to retrieve Lee Muxun's soul, which had already left his body, and then re-injected it into Lee Muxun's body, simultaneously unleashing both healing spells. In less than a minute, Lee Muxun's body was completely healed, and he opened his eyes and stood up from the ground. Your Majesty, wasn't I already dead? Lee Muxun moved his limbs in disbelief. George smiled. I said I would save your life. Since you wouldn't let me interfere in your battle with Lu Jin, then wait until he kills you and then bring you back. From today onwards, you are someone who has already died once. Your life no longer belongs to you, but to Nathan Island. He's alive. He's actually alive. He clearly had a hole in his head just now, and he's still alive. The surrounding crowd, seeing that George had actually managed to bring the seemingly dead Lee Muxun back to life and instantly heal all his injuries, exclaimed in astonishment. If you said he was still breathing, that would be understandable, but he was already dead, yet he was still brought back to life. You're alive again, Lu Jin, who had been sent flying 2 miles by George's wave of his hand, rushed back. When he saw Lee Muxun standing there unharmed, he was stunned, but his mental state returned to normal. Lu Jin, you've already killed Lee Muxun once. I saved him, his life no longer belongs to him. Also, I need to tell you something, Wu Jinsheng is already dead, so you don't need to look for him anymore. Lee Muxun will stay on the island as a Nazan guard from now on. George said a few words to Lu Jin, then teleported back to the dragon carriage with Lee Muxun, letting the 9-headed golden dragon pull the carriage away from the valley and back to Nazan Island. After hearing George's words, Lu Jin sat down on the ground with a sigh of relief. Wu Jinsheng is dead. Good riddance. The revenge for the Sanai sect is finally complete. Rest in peace, Master. George returned to Nazan Island, made several door key tokens for Li Mumu, and then went into seclusion to study the Divine Tree and the 6 treasures Immortal Thief, which could devour anything to strengthen the physical body. In the Marvel Universe, George slowly opened his eyes from the training chamber at the school. It's time to further enhance my mutant abilities. His mutant abilities originated from Professor X and Magneto, but initially were only at level 2. Later, due to learning magic, his mental strength increased significantly, indirectly developing his psychic abilities, making his current psychic abilities comparable to Professor X at his peak. Similarly, due to the superimposed electromagnetic force of Misaka Mikado's clones, his control over magnetism reached the level of the elderly Magneto in the movies. But now, further breakthroughs are difficult. Unless he directly advances to the single universe level, achieving a qualitative leap in his life level, it's possible to bring about another qualitative improvement in his mutant abilities. Unfortunately, even though his clones in each world are working hard to improve their strength, advancing from the Skyfather level to the single universe level is not something that can be done in a short time. Whether it's an advancement in inherent strength or an advancement through creating his own dimensional world, both still require refinement. According to the comic book setting he understands, mutants are a race formed by genetic mutations in humans on Earth, and these genetic mutations are not natural occurrences. In the distant past, when humans were still primitive apes, one of the Celestials, Erneg the Explorer, implanted a latent gene in some of these apes to expand their potential. As Earth's species evolved, these genes eventually became mutant genes, the X gene belonging to mutants. Because Earth itself is the core of the universe, and humans possess immense potential, the limits of mutant abilities can even reach the multiverse level. For example, the strongest mutant, Franklin, possesses superpowers such as time travel, manipulation of time, space, causality, reality alteration, and universe creation, a true multiverse-level mutant. Therefore, he has high expectations for his mutant abilities. At least for now, the abilities of Professor X and Magneto in the movies are not enough to satisfy him. He wants his psychic abilities to reach the point where, even without brainwave amplifiers, he can instantly control the consciousness of all humans on a planet. He wants his magnetic abilities to be like Magneto's in the comics, not just moving nuclear submarines and the Golden Gate Bridge, but moving large planets. How can he improve these 2 abilities? He had no way to do it before, but now he did. This was all thanks to Deadpool using the Time Bureau's equipment to get here, allowing him to obtain coordinates from numerous different parallel universes in the void. One of these universes happened to be able to help him enhance his abilities in both areas during an upcoming event. If given the chance, he might even obtain the Phoenix Force, one of the 3 ancient powers. He took out his sling ring, put it on, and carefully searched for a previously recorded coordinate. He quickly drew a portal in front of him. Currently, to travel to other Marvel universes, he still needed the sling ring and the power of the Vishanti. However, with his magical power, repaying the borrowed power would be no problem. Stepping through the portal, he arrived on Earth in another Marvel parallel universe. Looking around, based on the surrounding buildings and people's clothing, he could roughly determine that he hadn't made a mistake with the coordinates. His time estimate was also about right. I need to conceal my presence first. It wouldn't be good if the Time Management Bureau found out. George quickly concealed himself, spreading time energy around him to block the Time Management Bureau's detection before commencing his operation. The Time Management Bureau definitely wouldn't allow him to travel between parallel universes like this. Although he wasn't afraid of the Time Management Bureau, he didn't want to cause too much conflict and offend Loki, the god of story, behind them. Therefore, he couldn't be too conspicuous before completing his plan. The Time Management Bureau monitors the various parallel universes using instruments developed by Kang. Their manpower is limited, and they can't completely oversee everything. This is why the Time Management Bureau usually only appears to clean up the mess after major events have occurred. Moreover, because Loki, the god of story, has changed the Time Management Bureau's operating rules, their oversight has become much more relaxed. As long as no one is traveling between parallel universes causing damage, they generally don't pay much attention. Deadpool used the time machine to travel so many times, and it was only much later that the Time Management Bureau discovered and brought him back. So, if he's a little careful, perhaps by the time he completes his plan and returns to his own universe, the Time Management Bureau won't even notice. Chapter 583 I Am Magneto. Direction revealed. Eric Magnus Lansher. Following the golden guiding arrow, George quickly flew in a certain direction. Yes, the person he was looking for was Magneto of this world. 1983, Pruszko, Poland, inside a steel mill. The infamous Magneto, dressed in a worker's uniform and wearing a hard hat, was working diligently like an ordinary worker. Since the attack in 1973, he had become a globally wanted criminal. During his escape, he fell in love with an ordinary Polish woman, married her, and had a lovely daughter. From then on, he began the most ordinary life of a worker, no longer the Magneto. Just as he was operating the equipment, the chain carrying molten steel suddenly snapped, and a huge steel barrel fell, striking a worker squarely. If hit, the worker would surely die. Instinctively, he raised his hand and used his powers to freeze the huge steel barrel, saving his co-worker's life. However, his actions were observed by another co-worker above. Looks like I've arrived just in time. George, invisibility, floated above the factory, watching everything unfold below with a slight smile. He didn't interfere, quietly waiting for the factory to close, watching Magneto rush home. Upon arriving home, Magneto told his wife what had happened that day and quickly began packing. "You didn't do anything wrong, you saved that person." His wife praised Magneto for using his abilities to save someone, but Magneto shook his head. "That's not important. What's important is that if I'm exposed, you'll be exposed too, so we have to leave, but this is our home, and our daughter's home too." His wife was clearly reluctant to leave the home she had shared with Magneto for 10 years. How many decades does one have in a lifetime? Magneto, however, remained rational. He embraced his wife and said, "Home is where we are. When we first met, I told you my identity because I trusted you. I hope you trust me now. If we stay here any longer, it will be very dangerous. I'll go get Nina." His wife immediately turned to go to the room to find her daughter, but she found that her daughter was neither in the room nor in the backyard. The two realized something was wrong and quickly searched the woods near the house. They soon found their daughter. However, with their daughter were a dozen or so police officers from the town, all armed with batons and ropes, seemingly waiting for Magneto to arrive. After some negotiation, Magneto agreed to surrender in exchange for his daughter's release. But then tragedy struck. Seeing her father about to be taken away, Nina became agitated, activated her mutant powers, and controlled the owls in the forest to attack the police. One of the officers, in a moment of carelessness, accidentally shot a wooden arrow that killed Magneto's wife and daughter. "No!" Magneto roared in fury as he saw his wife and daughter shot dead, breaking free of his restraints and rushing to embrace them. The police officers, clearly not expecting things to turn out this way, froze in place. "Damn God, is this what you wanted? Fine, then I'll..." Enraged, Magneto removed the necklace from his daughter's neck, about to unleash his power to kill all the police officers present. Just then, a voice suddenly rang out in front of him. "Want to save your wife and daughter? Who are you?" Magneto looked at the strange young man who had suddenly appeared before him, and everything around him frozen in place, temporarily ceasing his use of his powers. George leaned down, looking at Magneto's wife and daughter in his arms, and smiled. "Anyway, I'm not that damn god. You don't need to know who I am, just know that I can save your wife and daughter, and you only need to agree to one small condition. You can save my wife and daughter." Magneto's body stiffened, but a look of doubt quickly appeared on his face. He was certain his wife and daughter were no longer breathing, completely dead. The man before him seemed to possess the same abilities as Charles. But Charles couldn't save the dead. "You have 5 seconds to think. In 5 seconds, your wife and daughter's souls will be sucked into the realm of the dead, and then I can't save them either." 5, 4, just as George counted down to 4 seconds, Magneto immediately shouted, "I'll agree to any conditions, as long as you can save them, even if it means sacrificing my soul." At this moment, even if the other party was a demon from hell, he was willing to give everything to save his wife and child. Upon hearing this, George quickly reached out and forcefully stuffed the souls of Magneto's wife and daughter, which had just left his body, back into his body. Then, he used his double-handed healing abilities to heal their injuries. "I'm not a demon. What do I need your soul for? I just need your help with a small matter, Eric, Dad." Seeing his wife and daughter slowly open their eyes and truly come back to life, Magneto immediately hugged them tightly and wept with joy. After calming down, he looked at George. "Whatever your purpose, I thank you for saving my wife and daughter." Wait a moment. George walked up to the frozen police officers. "Forget everything." With a wave of his hand, he had already altered the memories of those police officers. "I've erased the memory of the worker who discovered your identity, and now I've erased the memories of these police officers. You can continue to live here as an ordinary person. Thank you." "What do you need me to do for you?" Magneto took a deep breath after seeing what George had done. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Since this person had done so much for him, his request must be considerable. George waved his hand. "Don't be so nervous. It's nothing serious. I just hope you and your wife and daughter can disappear for a while." "Huh?" Magneto's eyes showed a big question mark, clearly not understanding what George meant. "You don't need to know so much. Just do as I say." George waved his hand and led Magneto's family into the large house prepared in his own little world. "It won't be long, about a week." Magneto looked at the fully equipped house and the endless void outside the windows, swallowed hard, and then nodded. He didn't know what the other party wanted to do, but they didn't seem to have any ill intentions towards his family. After agreeing with Magneto, George's figure flashed out of the small world, and then he used his shape-shifting ability to transform into Magneto's appearance. From now on, I am Magneto Eric. Chapter 584 Mutant Apocalypse. Why impersonate Magneto? Of course, it's to wait for Apocalypse to come looking for him and proactively enhance his abilities. In this parallel universe, there exists a mutant named Apocalypse. Apocalypse is one of the oldest mutants, born in the first dynasty of Egypt around 3000 BC. Because he can continuously transfer his consciousness into other mutants and accumulate and inherit their abilities, he became one of the most powerful mutants. According to George, his overall abilities are roughly at the level of the Skyfather, with no weaknesses. To kill him would require overwhelming power. This mutant was originally the ruler of ancient Egypt, but was betrayed when his consciousness was transferred into the body of a mutant with regenerative abilities. He was then sealed beneath the pyramids he created, slumbering for centuries. Now, he should have been accidentally awakened. Among the mutant abilities Apocalypse inherited, one he values most is the ability to significantly enhance the abilities of other mutants. Normally, after Apocalypse's rebirth, wanting to regain control of the world and become its ruler, he would seek out powerful mutants to recruit as his subordinates. Magneto is the most worthy of his recruitment. This is also why he disguised himself as Magneto. As long as he concealed all his power and only released mutant abilities similar to Magneto's, Apocalypse wouldn't notice anything amiss and would mistake him for Magneto. This way, he could effortlessly develop his abilities. In fact, in terms of strength, he was definitely stronger than Apocalypse, and capturing Apocalypse alive wouldn't be a problem. But the key was that Apocalypse possessed a mental power even stronger than Professor X's. Even if he captured him alive, it would be difficult to forcibly control Apocalypse to develop his abilities. Moreover, making too much noise and attracting the Time Bureau's attention beforehand would be troublesome. It was better to disguise himself as Magneto and let Apocalypse willingly develop his abilities for him. If the plan failed, it wouldn't be too late to use force. "Good evening, Henrik. What are we doing here?" The town's policeman regained his senses and greeted George, who was disguised as Magneto. Then, noticing the bow and arrows and rope in his hand, his face was full of confusion. George chuckled. "Didn't you just say you were going to catch rabbits in the forest?" "Yes, we're here to catch rabbits. We'll give you one when we catch them." The lead officer slapped his forehead, seemingly remembering, and led the rest of the officers into the forest. After the officers left, George grabbed a handful of grass from the ground, blew on it, and cast a transformation spell. The grass instantly turned into more than a dozen corpses. These corpses looked exactly like the officers who had left, including Magneto's wife and daughter. After setting everything up, He closed his eyes and began to subtly adjust his body. To impersonate Magneto, appearance and abilities alone weren't enough. They might fool ordinary people, but it would be difficult to fool Apocalypse and Caliban, who was currently conducting business on the black market. In his universe, there was also a mutant named Caliban, who had relied on Professor X and Wolverine for survival. Recently, after learning the ambidextrous technique, he had even cured Caliban's albinism. Before starting this plan, he had specifically experimented with Caliban. If he simply used the transfiguration charm to transform into Magneto, Caliban's tracking ability would still detect him, not Magneto. Therefore, he needed to further modify and disguise his soul to avoid being detected. Done. Having fully adjusted, George picked up Magneto's wife and daughter, now transformed using the transfiguration charm, his face contorted with pain. "My wife, my daughter, you died so tragically. I will take revenge on society, on humanity, and avenge you." About 10 minutes later, he stopped his performance and stood up. He had already sensed Caliban's ability to detect mutants, not ordinary people. Therefore, when searching for Magneto, Caliban could only see what he had just performed. If he conveyed that Magneto's wife and daughter were killed, and that Magneto killed a group of police officers in revenge, then everything would match up. Meanwhile, in the mutant black market, Mystique, who had just rescued Nightcrawler from the underground, placed a wad of US dollars on the table of the black market owner, Caliban. Same as always, get him a pass. In 1973, she heeded Professor X's advice and didn't kill Trask and the president. The world became aware of mutants, and the government did indeed acknowledge their legitimacy. But that was only on the surface. Many human forces and organizations continued to capture and study mutants in secret. So she became a lone hero, rescuing her fellow mutants around the world, becoming a hero in the hearts of many. "Oh, it's nice to see you, even though that's not your own face," Caliban said with a slightly teasing tone when he saw his old customer. "Excuse me, where's this gentleman being taken this time? I don't know, and I don't care. I just saved him, the rest is up to him." Mystique wasn't angry, she just shrugged indifferently. She wasn't Magneto, nor was she Professor X, she was simply doing her best to help mutants in need, without imposing her will on them. Caliban nodded, a hint of admiration on his face. Although he was a money-loving black market dealer, he also admired what Mystique had done. Because if he ever fell into human hands, Mystique would come to his rescue. She glanced at her mutant subordinate, who immediately pulled Nightcrawler aside for a photo and began processing his pass. "I'll give you some free news. Just as you walked in, I sensed your old friend." "Oh, if he's still considered a friend." Caliban picked up the money on the table and sniffed it. "Eric Landshear. I saw his wife and child dead beside him, along with a group of police officers' corpses. I believe the news will be reporting it soon. But Caliban admires you, so I'm willing to tell you this in advance." Hearing that Magneto's wife and daughter were dead, Mystique's pupils constricted. She immediately turned to Nightcrawler and asked, "How far can you teleport?" "Anywhere I've seen or been before, I can." Nightcrawler sat on the stool, holding his forged pass, and replied with a bewildered expression. Mystique lifted Nightcrawler off the stool. "Didn't you want to come with me?" "I agree. Teleport me to New York." She needed to find Professor X quickly, then have him pinpoint Magneto's exact location so they could appease him. Otherwise, the world would likely descend into chaos again. Chapter 585 Ability Greatly Enhanced. Not long after Mystique and Nightcrawler teleported away, two unfamiliar mutants appeared in the room, seemingly traversing space. Caliban wasn't too surprised. The mutants who came to him for business possessed a wide variety of abilities, and those related to space were not uncommon. Two unfamiliar guests. "What do you need?" "We are looking for the most powerful mutants in the world. Someone said you have a way to find them." One of them lifted his hood, revealing unusually blue skin. He was Apocalypse, the former ruler of ancient Egypt, who had just awakened beneath the pyramids to find his world occupied by lowly slaves. Crucially, these slaves had developed many powerful weapons, some even frightening him, such as nuclear weapons. To regain world dominance, he needed to recruit powerful mutants, develop their abilities, and rebuild the four horsemen of Apocalypse. He had already found Storm, who could control lightning and storms. He still needed three more. Caliban glanced at Apocalypse, then chuckled, "Of course I have a way, as long as you bring enough money." That evening, George sensed a spatial fluctuation at the doorway, a slight smile playing on his lips. Finally found them. If they hadn't come soon, I would have taken the initiative. The door opened, and 4 people entered the room. George looked up. The first one, with blue skin, a bald head, strange clothes, and immense energy within him, was undoubtedly Apocalypse. The 3 standing behind him, the white-haired black girl was likely Storm, and the one in the purple leather jacket was probably Psylocke, originally Caliban's bodyguard who had betrayed him after being impressed by Apocalypse's power. Speaking of which, he was the one who sent Psylocke back to this world. She had been cut and thrown into the void by the Time Bureau, becoming Cassandra's subordinate, and then captured and thrown into a smaller world. It was because of the soul-searching Psylocke that he learned about the situation in this universe, thus planning this operation. However, when he sent Psylocke back, he had erased all her memories of the void. So Psylocke always believed she was Caliban's bodyguard and had never left. The last man with metal wings on his back was probably the Angel who lost to Nightcrawler in the underground boxing ring. His white feathers had been enhanced by Apocalypse and turned into metal. He could fly as before, but they had also become weapons of war. His appearance reminded him of the senior disciple of Mount Shu from a movie he had once seen. You killed my wife and children, and before I even came to you, you delivered yourselves to me. Die? George pretended to be furious and activated his power. All the metal objects in the room instantly transformed into deadly weapons, covering the 4 of them. This scene startled the 3 behind him. With so many metal weapons and such speed, they really couldn't block them. Magneto was indeed Magneto. Even with their enhanced strength, they were still far inferior. No wonder he was a mutant who had assassinated presidents multiple times. Don't get excited. We are not those lowly slaves who harmed you. We just want you to join us. Apocalypse was completely unconcerned about the attacks. With a flick of his eyes, all the metal turned into sand and fell to the ground. Join you? George feigned confusion. Who are you? Me. Jehovah, the sun god. In countless reincarnations, I have countless names. I was born from death. And I will ignite the world-destroying fire that will annihilate humanity, putting this world back on track. I will uproot these inferior civilizations, sow new seeds, and fulfill my mission to ignite a new flame of civilization that belongs to us. Apocalypse walked up to George and said in a seductive tone, Child, I know you must be in great pain right now. Let's create a better world together. You're right. This world has disappointed me too much. I will destroy it. I'm willing to join you. George grabbed Apocalypse's hand, looking like he had been persuaded. Apocalypse's eyes lit up. He had thought he would have to use more persuasion, since Magneto wasn't as naive and easily fooled as the previous 3. He hadn't expected it to go so smoothly. It could only be said that the other party had just lost his family and was in his most angry and easily swayed state. So he didn't think much of it and began to activate his abilities. Your power is immense. Feel it with your heart, and I will help you unleash its full potential. Apocalypse's eyes turned completely wide, and George immediately felt the X gene within his body begin to tremble. His control over magnetic fields and mental power surged rapidly. This rate of increase was nothing short of rocket-like. Thinking about it, it made sense. Originally, he could lift a bridge and dozens of warships, but now he was developing the ability to move planets. The difference was like heaven and earth. This guy has even more potential than I imagined. A full 20 minutes passed, and Apocalypse felt he was nearing the limit of his ability, yet the other's potential was still not fully developed, with room for further growth. He couldn't help but feel a little shocked. He had never spent so much time developing the potential of a mutant before. He had only spent less than a minute developing the potential of the 3 mutants who had good potential. That's it, keep going, don't stop, I can still do it. Sensing that Apocalypse was about to withdraw his hand and stop using his ability, George immediately grabbed him. He hadn't expected the potential of his mutant genes to be so great. The current enhancements have already exceeded his initial expectations, and it seems there's still a lot left to develop. Indeed, while Apocalypse's ability primarily targets mutant genes, his physical body, strengthened by so many clones and cultivated with various techniques, is fundamentally different from that of ordinary people. This might indirectly enhance the latent power of his mutant genes. Furthermore, he doesn't only possess Magneto's abilities, Professor X's abilities are also present. Apocalypse was developing 2 aspects of his mutant gene potential, naturally taking twice as long. I can't go on. Half an hour later, Apocalypse felt his body experience the first time he felt his abilities were exhausted. He abruptly pulled his hand back, ceasing his efforts to develop his potential. Normal mutants, when pushed to their limits, would feel weak and even faint, like ordinary humans, requiring rest. But Apocalypse, having inherited so many abilities, with their overlapping and continuous development, had long surpassed the limits of normal mutants. This was the first time in all these years that he had experienced the feeling of his abilities being completely exhausted. Chapter 586, The Drained Apocalypse. It's a pity, it's almost there, almost fully developed. George noticed Apocalypse's steps were noticeably unsteady and couldn't help but feel a little regretful. However, overall, he was already very satisfied, far exceeding his expectations. If Apocalypse weren't here, making it difficult for him to experiment, he would have really wanted to test the limits of his two abilities. He felt his mental power was unprecedentedly strong now, seemingly able to instantly envelop the entire Earth with a thought, without much effort. As for magnetism, he was confident he could directly pull the entire Earth on a journey through space. A wandering Earth wouldn't seem too difficult. You're not good enough. Turning to look at Apocalypse, George showed a hint of disdain. If Apocalypse were stronger, he might actually be able to fully develop his potential. You? Apocalypse keenly caught George's expression and immediately felt as if he had been humiliated. But he quickly realized he might have misjudged, because the other's face was full of gratitude. Thank you for enhancing my abilities and giving me the chance for revenge. From now on, if you say one thing, I'll never say another. If you say east, I'll never say west. George entered his performance mode again. He had achieved his goal this time, or rather, exceeded expectations. He could now completely turn against Apocalypse and kill him immediately. However, just now, a new idea suddenly occurred to him. Through his contact, he discovered that Apocalypse might not be as strong as he had imagined, and his mutant abilities had received an epic upgrade, especially his mental strength. So he wondered if he could find an opportunity to directly acquire Apocalypse's abilities. If he could acquire Apocalypse's ability to develop mutant strength, he could continue to develop it for himself. As long as his life essence improved, his mutant genes would become stronger, and his potential would naturally increase, so his mutant abilities would continue to be developed without falling behind. In the future, perhaps the abilities of these two mutants alone could be elevated to the level of a single universe and the multiverse. Mental strength is spiritual strength, and spiritual strength has a great enhancement to magic, which will never be outdated. Magnetism, one of the four fundamental forces of the universe, has many uses beyond just controlling metals. For example, it could enhance his lightning power, significantly increasing the effectiveness of his lightning magic. He also had a plan for acquiring Apocalypse's abilities. Very good, I like what you said. Apocalypse used his mental abilities to investigate and found the other party wasn't lying, finally smiling. He realized he'd probably misread it. Expressions are easily misinterpreted, but the mind doesn't. Among his many reincarnations, one possessed a body capable of using mental abilities, so he also had them. However, his mental abilities couldn't erase or modify memories, nor control others. They could only read minds. Magneto's potential was immense, far exceeding his expectations, but Magneto lacked mental abilities, making it easy for him to read minds. Therefore, he was now only happy to have subdued such a powerful and loyal knight. George, outwardly respectful, inwardly sneered, trying to read my mind? Eat shit, Ray. Many mutants possess telepathic abilities, but most, like Diamond Girl, can only read minds and have no other special abilities. Professor X's power stems not only from his ability to read minds, but also from his ability to directly control people's thoughts, even their bodies, and to access their brains to modify and erase memories. George inherited Professor X's genes, so his telepathic abilities are the same. Furthermore, as a sorcerer, he is also skilled in mental magic. With these combined, even Apocalypse's strong mind-reading abilities couldn't penetrate George's true thoughts. Crucially, George's telepathic abilities have now greatly increased. His mental strength far surpasses Apocalypse's, making it even more impossible for Apocalypse to read him. What Apocalypse reads about George's inner thoughts is all fake, all what George wants Apocalypse to read. Let's go back to base. After resting for a while, Apocalypse, finally catching his breath, opened the portal again. Crossing the portal, they arrived at an abandoned factory. This was originally where the angels rested, now transformed into Apocalypse's temporary base. You need better protective clothing. Apocalypse glanced at the four men, dressed in various ways, and with a flick of his wrist, activated his molecular recombination ability. The clothes on George and the others quickly transformed into battle suits resembling Apocalypse's distinctive attire. George touched the material of the clothes, finding that while not as good as suits made of vibranium and Uru metal, they were only slightly inferior. Apocalypse really has a lot of abilities, but unfortunately, most of them are useless to me now. Apocalypse inherited the abilities of countless mutants, but the various spells he learned could basically substitute for these abilities to achieve similar effects. If he had been able to seize Apocalypse's abilities when he first arrived in Marvel, it would have been a huge help. But with his strength at that time, it was impossible to seize Apocalypse's abilities. He would have been instantly killed. Therefore, some things cannot be taken for granted. He learned magic step by step to his current level very steadily and safely. Moreover, mutant abilities are like that. If the body is unwell, problems can easily arise. Magic is different. Learning magic and understanding its fundamental laws means grasping the truth. Even if only the soul remains, it won't be greatly affected. Therefore, given the choice between magic and mutant abilities, he would still choose magic. Magic is the foundation of power. Mutant abilities are merely supplementary. Next, we will, after helping everyone change into their battle suits, Apocalypse began explaining his plan to George and the other 4 horsemen. The plan was simple, consisting of 3 steps. First, eliminate the high-ranking officials of various countries and destroy all nuclear weapons that might pose a threat to him. Second, have George, disguised as Magneto, alter the Earth's magnetic field, completely dismantling modern civilization. The final step was to eliminate the remaining rebellious humans and establish a slave society with him as the ruler and mutants as the upper class, like ancient Egypt. At this time, Apocalypse was unaware of Professor X's abilities and hadn't considered using them to directly address the threats from the human elite and nuclear weapons. However, George knew that Apocalypse would soon discover this and find a way to possess Professor X's body and seize his abilities. This was also the best opportunity for him to acquire Apocalypse's powers. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 587 The Last Insurance. Here it comes. Feeling a powerful surge of brainwaves enveloping the entire Earth, George knew Mystique must have notified Professor X, who was using his brainwave amplifier to search for Magneto. Soon, because he had mimicked everything about Magneto, Professor X's brainwaves naturally connected. "Hello, old friend." The moment Professor X's voice echoed in his mind, he unleashed a pre-programmed memory of Magneto's wife and daughters being killed, adding a significant amount of negative emotion. Upon reading this, Professor X choked up. "I'm sorry, truly sorry. I felt your pain and confusion. Charles, do you think you can understand my pain just because you've entered my head?" George replied, mimicking Magneto's tone. Professor X immediately unleashed his most proficient persuasive technique. "Things shouldn't be like this. Come back, Eric, let me help you." George continued mimicking Magneto, engaging in a heated argument with Professor X, which quickly attracted Apocalypse's attention. Apocalypse activated his psychic abilities, entering Professor X's brain and indirectly connecting to his brainwaves. From there, he connected to the brainwave amplifier. Possessing the ability to control signals and electronic devices, Apocalypse indirectly controlled Professor X by controlling the entire brainwave amplifier. This is truly amazing. It's incredible that someone with such abilities exists, and that such an interesting device exists. It seems we can skip the first step, entering Professor X's consciousness. He saw that besides mind reading, Professor X could also manipulate the will of others. Furthermore, the brainwave amplifier Professor X carried could locate and remotely control anyone in the world. Thus, by briefly controlling Professor X through the device, he could make Professor X use the brainwave amplifier to find and control the soldiers responsible for launching nuclear weapons in every country in the world. A single step would allow them to simultaneously launch nuclear weapons, restarting the entire world. In fact, he did begin to do just that. Meanwhile, George secretly extended a sliver of his mental power, following Professor X's brainwaves, and saw the scene inside the brainwave amplifier room at the mutant school. He still needed to keep an eye on things. Although, according to the movies he'd seen, the professor eventually regained his senses and all the nuclear weapons were launched, they didn't explode. But because of his existence, there might be a butterfly effect, or this might not be entirely the Marvel universe from that movie. There are so many parallel universes in Marvel, and quite a few are similar. What if, in this parallel universe, Professor X didn't manage to stop it in time, all the nuclear bombs exploded, Earth's modern civilization was destroyed, and apocalypse once again ruled the world? Who knows? So he still needed to keep an eye on things, so he could remedy any mishaps. For example, if Professor X didn't manage to stop it in time, he could directly activate his ability to send all the nuclear bombs into space to explode. Anyway, his magnetic field could now cover the entire Earth. Even if he was in the North Pole, he could control the metallic materials in the South Pole. He was the last line of defense. No, Alex, quick, use your ability, destroy it, destroy the mainframe, destroy everything here. Fortunately, when all the world's nuclear weapons were launched into the air, Professor X, with his powerful psychic abilities, finally managed to temporarily break free. Upon hearing Professor X's command, Alex immediately unleashed his superpowers without hesitation, pulling up his shirt. Energy rapidly gathered in the special ring on his chest, unleashing a shockwave the size of a bucket that instantly destroyed most of the brainwave amplifier's components. With the amplifier destroyed, Apocalypse could no longer control Professor X through the malfunctioning amplifier, thus preventing Professor X from controlling soldiers from various countries. Therefore, although the nuclear weapons were launched, they did not explode as Apocalypse desired. No, Apocalypse roared, opening a portal to the School of Mutants. Professor X's abilities were too powerful. He had decided to reincarnate in Professor X's body to acquire his powers. With his strength, once he possessed Professor X's abilities, he could control all of humanity even without a brainwave amplifier. This would simplify everything. He could instantly become the ruler of all humanity, with no one able to resist or betray him. Come on. Stepping out of the spatial portal, Apocalypse immediately used his power to pull the unconscious Professor X over. At the same time, George immediately activated his power, turning the metal in his brainwave amplifier into chains, binding everyone else, especially knocking Alex unconscious with a single blow. There was no other way. If he didn't, the impulsive Alex would unleash a shockwave, and if the energy was concentrated, it would blow up the entire school. This way, at least the school could be prevented from being destroyed. Although they weren't from the same universe, nor the same people, there was still some connection, and he was willing to help if he could. The same appearance, the same name, some people might be good in one universe but bad in another. Therefore, he wouldn't treat people from two universes as the same person because of this. In his universe, Wolverine, Professor X, and Captain America were his friends. If he encountered evil people in other universes, he wouldn't show mercy, kill or bury them as needed. But if everything was similar, only the universe was different, he was still willing to help if it was convenient. If he hadn't acted now, the school would have been bombed, Alex would have died in the explosion, and Mystique and the others would have been captured by Stryker. Well done. Apocalypse was satisfied with George's quick thinking and action. He reopened the portal and took the unconscious Professor X directly to Cairo, Egypt, the city where he slept. He would build the pyramid for his reincarnation here, and then transfer his consciousness and soul into Professor X's body. Although he hadn't caused all of humanity's nuclear weapons to explode this time, at least they had all been launched, and no new ones could be built in the short term. Therefore, during the reincarnation period, humanity would not pose any threat to him. As for humanity's other weapons, such as airplanes, cannons, and missiles, Magneto, one of the new four horsemen of Apocalypse, could completely block them. If any other humans dared to cause trouble, the other three horsemen, whose strength he had enhanced, could handle them. Apocalypse entered the portal, followed by Angel, Silk, and Storm. George paused, secretly creating a clone of himself that remained hidden. Chapter 588 Scarlet Witch Wanda. Professor, the portal vanished, and Beast Hank, overwhelmed by emotion, lost the effect of the mutant gene-suppressing drug injected into his body, slowly transforming into his blue-haired beast form. In beast form, Hank's strength increased dramatically, allowing him to tear apart the metal chains binding him. He then helped Mystique and CIA agent Kamar-Taj free themselves from their restraints and revived the unconscious Shockwave Alex. Who's that guy with Eric? Why did he kidnap Charles? Mystique and Beast were filled with confusion. They knew nothing about Apocalypse. Moira quickly shared the information she had gathered about Apocalypse and the Four Horsemen. George, the thought form, didn't linger in the brainwave amplification chamber, teleporting directly to the school gate, then dispelling his invisibility and walking in confidently. That speed, is that Quicksilver? He stopped after only 2 steps, as a silver-haired youth appeared beside him. Friend, is this Xavier's school for gifted youngsters? Quicksilver asked George, holding a tattered business card and looking at the school ahead. He had recently learned from his mother that Magneto, whom he had rescued from the Pentagon 10 years ago, was actually his biological father. So, he had come here with a business card left by Professor X 10 years ago, hoping to find Magneto through Professor X and see what kind of person his biological father was. I think so. This is my first time here too, George replied with a smile. Hello, George, Pietro Maximoff. Quicksilver extended his hand and shook hands happily with George. This is your first time, and it's my first time too. Looks like we're destined to meet. Cheers to destiny. George flicked his wrist, and 2 bottles of cola appeared out of thin air, handing one to Quicksilver. Quicksilver's eyes lit up. That's cool. Your superpower is turning into cola. I can turn anything into cola. George opened the cola and took a sip. Quicksilver shook the cola in his hand, an expression of disbelief on his face. You can conjure money, of course. George flipped his hand again, and a wad of US dollars appeared in his hand. Gold, diamonds, anything. Your superpower is amazing. Quicksilver's face was full of envy. Although he was very fast enough that he could carry away all the banknotes in the bank without being discovered, that was illegal. He couldn't do it, and he would eventually be found out anyway. His mother hadn't paid less compensation for his past thefts. But George's superpower was different. He could conjure money on his own, and he could conjure whatever he wanted. It was a superpower that everyone dreamed of. George, do you have a girlfriend? Quicksilver put his arm around George's shoulder and asked enthusiastically. He was determined to make this friend. No, not in this world. George's face showed wariness. I'm not gay. What are you thinking? My sexual orientation is normal. I have a sister who is very beautiful and doesn't have a boyfriend yet. Do you want me to introduce you? Quicksilver gave him a knowing look. Your sister? Is your sister an adult yet? George raised an eyebrow. He remembered that Quicksilver's sister was only 5 or 6 years old during Days of Future Past. Now, 10 years later, she could be 15 or 16 at most. Quicksilver must be desperate to become his brother-in-law. I have 2 sisters. My younger sister isn't an adult yet. And my older sister is just a few minutes younger than me. Quicksilver put his arm around George's shoulder and introduced them as they walked inside. Just a few minutes. No way. George's body stiffened upon hearing this. What's your sister's name? Wanda Maximoff, Quicksilver replied. His twin sister was also a mutant, born with a telekinetic ability to manipulate objects. However, because her abilities sometimes went out of control, she had accidentally hurt someone when she was young, so she was very insecure. Although she was beautiful, she was already working but still didn't have a boyfriend. He thought this person in front of him was quite nice. He looked very friendly at first glance, and being a mutant, he wouldn't feel any psychological barrier. Most importantly, he could conjure up anything. In the future, if he wanted something, he could confidently ask George to conjure it up for him. It really is Scarlet Witch. George's face showed a hint of surprise. He hadn't expected Quicksilver to have a twin sister in this world who was Scarlet Witch. However, in the many settings of the Marvel Universe, there is one. Quicksilver and Wanda are Magneto's children. That's a good thing. His eyes darted around, and a smile appeared on his face. He had deliberately left a thought form at the school, his purpose being to get to know Jean Grey, the Phoenix. There are 3 ancient powers in the Marvel Universe, each of which, when fully unleashed, can reach the level of the multiverse. The first is the Phoenix Force, the power hidden within Jean Grey. It is not yet complete. Even a small portion of it can easily destroy Apocalypse, a being of the Skyfather level. The second is the Chaos Force, originating from the ancient evil god, the most powerful god of dark magic, the peak multiverse-level dimensional demon god, Sithon. The power used by Scarlet Witch Wanda is Sithon's Chaos Force. The third is the Fairy Force, possessing self-awareness, wandering throughout the multiverse, devouring anything it encounters. His primary goal in coming to this universe was to utilize Apocalypse to enhance his mutant abilities, which he has already achieved. He continues to advance, hoping to fully acquire Apocalypse's powers. His secondary goal is to see if he can use his newly learned 6 treasures of the Immortal Thief technique to absorb the Phoenix Force from Jean Grey. If he could devour the Phoenix Force within Jean, it would be a tremendous boost to his abilities. The Phoenix Force within Jean isn't multidimensional, it's at most a small portion he inherited, but its energy level is high. Even this small portion, when fully unleashed, is enough to reach the level of a single universe. If he can absorb it all and fully digest it to enhance himself, his true form can definitely advance to the level of a single universe. Now, besides Jean with the Phoenix Force, he also has Wanda with the Chaos Force. This means that in addition to the Phoenix Force, he also has the opportunity to acquire a portion of Chaos Force. Of course, with his novice level in the 6 treasures of the Immortal Thief technique, absorbing such high-level energy will likely be extremely difficult. But that's alright, there's plenty of time. He plans to stay in this universe for a while longer and develop gradually. Anyway, as long as the Time Bureau doesn't cause trouble, it's not a big deal. The other school is under Professor X's management, so there's nothing to worry about. Chapter 589 George, the new teacher. George and Quicksilver chatted as they walked, quickly arriving at the school principal's office. Professor X had been taken to the underground brainwave amplification chamber, so the students upstairs were unaware of what had happened and continued as usual. Mystique and Beast wouldn't tell the students, adding to their panic. Knock. 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 George knocked on the office door. He clearly sensed that Mystique and Beast were in the principal's office, likely discussing how to find and rescue Professor X. The principal isn't here today. What can I do for you? Long time no see. Beast, hearing the knock, assumed a student wanted to ask Charles a question. This happened frequently at the school. Most students had psychological issues that Charles needed to address. But upon opening the door, he recognized Quicksilver, whom he hadn't seen in 10 years. 10 years ago, thanks to Quicksilver, they were able to rescue Magneto from the Pentagon, so he remembered Quicksilver well. Long time no see. I wanted to ask Principal Charles about Magneto, Quicksilver stated his purpose. Mystique approached upon hearing the commotion. What? Did you hear his speech on TV and get brainwashed? Magneto was wanted by every country in the world because of the attack 10 years ago, but many mutants admired him because of that speech. She hadn't met Quicksilver and assumed he was looking for Magneto for the same reason. Quicksilver and George entered the office. After a moment's hesitation, Quicksilver explained, "It's like this, actually, he is my father." What? Mystique, Beast, and Shockwave all looked surprised. Quicksilver made a finger and circle gesture. "It's him and my mother who had, no need for that. We know what happened, but are you sure it's true?" Mystique quickly interrupted Quicksilver's rambling thoughts and confirmed it again. She hadn't expected Magneto to have such a grown son. Quicksilver looked at least 26 or 27. "Of course, he abandoned my mother and disappeared before I was even born. I saw him once 10 years ago, but I didn't know it was him then. Now I want to see him and talk to him," Quicksilver said, a little sadly. Beast stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder, quickly recounting what had just happened. "It might be a bit difficult now, Eric, and, if you're looking for someone, perhaps I can help," George interjected. Beast turned to look at George, a puzzled look on his face. "Excuse me, sir, you don't seem to be a teacher or student at the school. Are you Pete's friend? To be precise, Pete and I just met at the school gate. I heard the school is recruiting teachers, so I came to apply." George smiled. Beast nodded excitedly. "The school is indeed recruiting teachers. Can you find people? Because the number of mutant students at the school is increasing. Charles and he alone cannot teach them all. So they have been recruiting mutant teachers with high salaries, since Charles is never short of money. It's just that they haven't found many suitable ones yet." "Sure, as long as I have his name, I can find his location," George nodded with a smile. Quicksilver, standing beside him, asked doubtfully, "Isn't your superpower the ability to conjure anything?" "That's just one of my superpowers," George replied. "Great. On behalf of the principal, I'm now recruiting you as a teacher at the school. I hope you can help us find the principal's location right now. Rescuing the professor was the priority. There was no time for formalities." Upon hearing this, George immediately gave an okay sign. However, just then, they suddenly heard the sound of helicopters outside. Looking out the window, they saw more than a dozen armed helicopters already parked outside the school, and a large number of soldiers armed with special weapons had surrounded the school. "Oh no, it's Stryker," Mystique recognized the leading officer at a glance. It was William Stryker, Trask's second-in-command back then, responsible for capturing mutants for experiments. Unfortunately, her warning came too late. Stryker had already ordered his soldiers to open fire, and the special weapons immediately emitted special shockwaves that enveloped the entire school. All the mutant teachers and students in the school were instantly knocked unconscious after being hit by the sonic wave. This included Beast, Mystique, and Quicksilver in the office. Luckily, we left a memory form, otherwise Stryker would have wiped them all out. In the original storyline, the school exploded, and Quicksilver arrived to save all the students and teachers except for Shockwave, who was killed because he was too close. Cyclops and Jean also rushed back to the school. When Stryker led his men to arrest them, Cyclops and the others escaped capture because they were searching for Shockwave's body in the school ruins. Later, Cyclops, Jean, and Nightcrawler infiltrated Stryker's base, rescued Mystique and the others, and released Wolverine, who had been turned into Weapon X now that the school hadn't exploded. Cyclops and the others went back to the classroom, where Stryker's weapon instantly took everyone down. If he hadn't been there, things would have taken an unpredictable turn. Wake up quickly, George waved his hand at the unconscious Mystique, and the group instantly snapped awake. What happened to us? Those soldiers down there stunned you with special weapons. I used my abilities to wake you up, George explained, pointing to the soldiers rushing into the school outside the window. Mystique rubbed her temples. Thanks, you really have a lot of abilities, just some minor ones, but they're good for helping out, George smiled. Meanwhile, Quicksilver put on his headphones and turned on his favorite running music. Let me teach these rude guys a lesson. Entering super speed mode, in just a few seconds, Stryker and all the soldiers attacking the school were ducted to the tree trunks in the school's grove. If it weren't for someone like Apocalypse, most people wouldn't stand a chance, George thought to himself as he watched Quicksilver return to his original position and remove his headphones. Compared to Quicksilver in the main Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Quicksilver in this universe is much faster. The scenario of him not having enough time to shield someone from bullets while saving them is impossible. He can only be hit by a sneak attack before he senses danger and activates his abilities, like when Stryker ordered his soldiers to use a sonic attack. Also, if the opponent's physical strength is too great, like Apocalypse, even with incredible speed, it's useless if you can't break through their defenses. Chapter 590 Professor, I have a plan. Having resolved the issues with Stryker and the soldiers, Beast gathered the older and more combat-capable students from the school and began assigning tasks. Those with weaker abilities stayed behind to care for the younger students and guard Stryker and the soldiers. Those with stronger abilities, like Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Nightcrawler, joined them to rescue Professor X. Although they lacked combat experience, the situation was urgent, and they had to be called upon. Nightcrawler, with his teleportation abilities, was particularly suited for the rescue. Therefore, the team rescuing Professor X consisted of 9 people: CIA Agent Mora, Beast Hank, Mystique Raven, Shockwave Alex, Cyclops Scott, Nightcrawler Kurt, Phoenix Jean Grey, Quicksilver Pete, and the newly hired teacher George. Once everyone was present, Beast led them to his specially modified basement, where he had prepared his latest combat suits, made of special materials with extremely high defensive capabilities. There was also a supersonic fighter jet he had developed himself. He agreed with the professor's philosophy of treating humanity with goodwill and coexisting peacefully, but also remaining wary of them. These things were for future school emergencies, allowing for immediate combat and escape. Follow the arrow, it will lead us to the principal's exact location. After boarding the fighter jet, George raised his hand, and a golden arrow appeared in front of the aircraft, guiding the Beast piloting it. Just as the jet left New York, Professor X's voice began to echo in everyone's minds. Listen, everyone in this world, this is my advice to you, to all you, humans and mutants. You have lost your way, but I have returned, and the final judgment is imminent. All the buildings you have built. Meanwhile, on a hillside outside Cairo, Egypt, Apocalypse was forcing Professor X to deliver his pre-war declaration to the entire world. George stood by, watching with a relaxed expression. After delivering his declaration of war, Apocalypse turned to face Cairo and began to unleash his abilities. Under Apocalypse's influence, all the buildings in Cairo rapidly disintegrated and slowly reassembled into a massive pyramid. Apocalypse's reincarnation ritual required immense energy, and this pyramid could help him collect vast amounts of solar energy, allowing him to successfully complete the ritual. While Apocalypse constructed the pyramid, Professor X, unwilling to give up, asked George, "Are you really going to participate in this carnage and destroy the world?" "I have no choice," George replied outwardly, but secretly established a connection with Professor X in his mind. "Of course not, don't be surprised, keep a normal expression." Professor X's expression immediately changed upon hearing the sudden voice in his mind, but quickly returned to normal. "Who are you?" "It's me." George winked at Professor X, who froze for a moment. "Eric, how do you have telepathic abilities?" "No, you're not Eric. I am indeed not Magneto, but I'm not your enemy either. I impersonated Magneto to deal with Apocalypse," George explained to Professor X. "I have a plan that should be able to take down Apocalypse." Isn't that too risky?" Professor X was somewhat worried. He knew nothing about this person impersonating Magneto and wasn't sure if the other party could pull it off. George calmly replied, "Don't worry, I know him well and I'm confident. Otherwise, if we really fight, trying to defeat him by force will only be more dangerous. Then let's go with your plan." "I'll cooperate," Professor X nodded inwardly. In this situation, they had no choice but to try their luck. Half an hour later, as the pyramid used for Apocalypse's reincarnation was nearly complete, a supersonic fighter jet had arrived over Cairo. George's remaining consciousness helped deal with Stryker, preventing Mystique from being captured by Stryker and taking her directly to Cairo in a supersonic fighter jet, greatly saving time. So, in the original storyline, Professor X was already halfway through his reincarnation before everyone arrived, but now the pyramid wasn't even finished, and everyone had already arrived. Of course, this was all part of his plan. "Looks like some overconfident fools have come looking for trouble." The angel raised his iron wings, pointing to the supersonic fighter jet rapidly approaching from afar. He was now quite confident in his abilities. "Yes, they're all reckless fools." George said this, but secretly he had already communicated with Professor X to the people in the plane, informing them of the upcoming battle plan. "Your Majesty, don't worry, continue building the pyramid. We'll handle this little trouble. Arrest them all. I want them to know who the true ruler of this world is." Apocalypse nodded, continuing to focus on building his reincarnation pyramid. With the enhanced 4 horsemen of Apocalypse present, especially Magneto, who was already the world's strongest mutant before his enhancements, the other mutants were no match. The supersonic fighter landed, and 6 mutants in X-suits emerged: Beast, Mystique, Quicksilver, Cyclops, Shockwave, and Phoenix. George, Nightcrawler, and more remained absent. George, in his psychic form, stated he wasn't skilled in combat. Moira, as an ordinary human, couldn't participate in this level of fighting, and Nightcrawler was waiting for an opportunity to rescue Professor X. Upon meeting, the two sides quickly engaged in combat without much explanation. The 4 horsemen of Apocalypse faced off against the 6 X-Men. The two sides exchanged blows, cooperating effectively, making the fight somewhat evenly matched. However, the X-Men soon found themselves on the defensive. Although the X-Men had the extraordinary Quicksilver, the power displayed by George, disguised as Magneto, was also formidable. Even when George held back, using only what Apocalypse considered his full strength, he still managed to trap Quicksilver with a wall formed by electromagnetic force. Seeing that he had the upper hand, Apocalypse, who had initially intended to stop helping out, abandoned his full focus on continuing to build the pyramid. In another 3 or 4 minutes, he could complete the reincarnation pyramid and begin the reincarnation ritual. Just then, Nightcrawler intervened, teleporting directly to Professor X's side, grabbing his arm, and then teleporting back into the supersonic fighter jet. Apocalypse, seeing his reincarnated Professor X rescued, immediately paused, intending to stop building the pyramid again. However, George's confident voice quickly rang out, reassuring him. "Your Majesty, trust me, they can't escape." George single-handedly controlled the supersonic fighter jet that was about to take off, then flew over and forcefully entered the aircraft. Chapter 591: Devouring the Apocalypse. Let's begin the second step of the plan. After entering the supersonic fighter, George didn't attack anyone. Instead, he glanced at Professor X, and his appearance rapidly changed, transforming from Magneto to Professor X. This startled Moira and Nightcrawler, who almost mistook George for Mystique in disguise. With a wave of his hand, George released the real Magneto from the small world, Eric, you know the general situation now. Don't give yourself away later. You saved my wife and daughter's lives, so I'll definitely take care of this small matter for you. Eric nodded, and with another wave of George's hand, his clothes transformed into the suits worn by the 4 horsemen of apocalypse. He grabbed George, now Professor X, glanced at his old friend, flew out of the supersonic fighter, placed George next to Apocalypse, and then continued to join the battle. Meanwhile, Mystique and the others received a message from Professor X, made frequent mistakes, and were quickly captured by Magneto and trapped in a metal cage. The one with the teleportation ability escaped, and the rest have been captured, Magneto reported to Apocalypse, who had finally completed the reincarnation pyramid. Apocalypse nodded, unconcerned, and simply instructed, stand guarding the pyramid closely. My reincarnation ritual cannot be interrupted. His primary concern now is completing the ritual and acquiring Professor X's mutant abilities. This would allow him to control the minds of everyone on Earth. No matter how far the teleporting mutant ran, he could make him return on his own. Opening a portal, Apocalypse had the Sands lift George, transporting him directly to the reincarnation platform at the very center of the pyramid. He secured George to one side of the platform, lay down on another, and activated the switch above, beginning the absorption of the sun's power for reincarnation. As the reincarnation pyramid fully activated, thin golden lines extended from Apocalypse's platform, slowly spreading to George's. Apocalypse's spiritual power and soul also began to flow into George's body along these golden lines. After all this work, I've finally been tricked. A bright smile finally appeared on George's face as he felt Apocalypse's soul invade his body. Making Apocalypse initiate the reincarnation ritual and enter his body was the most difficult step in his plan. Because if Apocalypse discovered the anomaly and refused to reincarnate, killing him would be futile. But once the reincarnation ritual was activated, the rest would be much easier. All souls returned to their places. At this moment, George directly opened the mental connection between himself and all his clones. The souls of the 8 clone worlds simultaneously returned to his main body, greatly increasing his mental strength. In terms of mental power alone, he felt he might have already broken through to the Heavenly Father level and entered the single universe level. If he wanted to destroy Apocalypse's invading soul now, it would be a matter of a single thought, effortless. But he didn't do that because the reincarnation ritual wasn't complete, and he hadn't yet obtained Apocalypse's abilities. So he created a smaller mental world within his own mental world, a smaller mental world with a strength similar to Professor X's mental world. He used this smaller spiritual world to resist Apocalypse's attacks, making Apocalypse feel that he was constantly breaking through Professor X's defenses and taking over Professor X's body. In this way, Apocalypse would not stop the reincarnation ritual. Ha ha ha, give up, you can't defeat me. Persisting will only make you more miserable. You should be proud to be absorbed by me. Inside George's disguised spiritual world, Apocalypse, a spiritual entity more than 10 meters tall, trampled George's conjured Professor X spiritual entity under his feet. He kept tearing apart his body, swallowing the spiritual energy into his belly to strengthen his own soul. Once he had completely swallowed the entire spiritual entity, he could take over this body. Each reincarnation was like this, and he would become stronger and stronger. It's done. This body belongs to me. After swallowing the last piece of spiritual energy, Apocalypse felt that his reincarnation ritual was completely completed. However, just as he was about to break through this spiritual world and fully take over the body and awaken, he found that after breaking through the small world, he had arrived in an even larger spiritual world. How could this be? Compared to the mental world he had just encountered, this one was boundless. He had never experienced anything like it before, nor had he ever seen such a vast mental world. What is that? Suddenly, he felt a massive shadow loom over him. Looking up, he saw a towering giant behind him. How big was that giant? He looked about the size of the giant's little finger. There can't be such a powerful mental entity in this world. This is impossible. When he fought Professor X, the difference between their mental states was like that of an adult and a child, but now it was like that of an adult and an ant. How could he believe this? You don't need to believe it, because you can die now. George raised his foot and stomped down, instantly crushing Apocalypse's mental entity. Then, with a gulp, he absorbed all the fragments of Apocalypse's exploded mental body into his stomach. He had countless ways to deal with souls, including spirit manipulation, dual-wielding techniques, soul sealing, and soul absorption. Even with the same mental entity, Apocalypse couldn't defeat him, let alone with such a vast difference in strength. After absorbing Apocalypse's spiritual body, George clearly felt a change in his physical body, with his X gene rapidly increasing and strengthening. He also instinctively learned many strange and miscellaneous abilities, including the one Apocalypse used to enhance mutant genes. Done. Sitting up from the reincarnation platform, George released the soul power of his various clones and turned to look to the side, where Apocalypse's body had turned into a pool of black ash and gradually dissipated. His body hadn't transformed into that ugly blue-skinned, bald appearance due to the reincarnation ritual. His physical life level was far superior to Apocalypse's. How could he possibly transform into Apocalypse's appearance through assimilation? Therefore, this reincarnation not only absorbed all of Apocalypse's abilities and soul power, but also preserved his physical appearance. It was perfect. He flew to the outside of the pyramid and saw that Storm, Angel, and Psylocke had all been subdued. This was normal. Either Magneto or Quicksilver could easily subdue these 3 Apocalypse Knights. To be honest, of the 4 knights Apocalypse had chosen, apart from Magneto, the others weren't particularly impressive. It's over, Apocalypse is dead. Seeing Professor X, Magneto, and the others all looking at him, George announced the victory with a smile. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this. Chapter 592 George's Advice. Restored to its original state, having gained Apocalypse's power, George was in high spirits. With a wave of his hand, he restored the shattered city of Cairo to its former state. Indeed, with increased mental power, the magic is even more effective. He felt that repairing a city with a restoration spell was much easier than before. Oh, God, the X-Men members gasped in amazement as they watched George repair the city destroyed by Apocalypse in the blink of an eye. They didn't recognize the George who had changed his appearance. They had only cooperated in the act and been captured because of Professor X's mental prompting. Now, seeing George successfully resolve Apocalypse within the pyramid and demonstrate such powerful abilities, how could they not be astonished? While everyone was marveling, George's real body and his mental form locked eyes. Then he suddenly used special magic to switch positions and change his appearance. In other words, the George standing behind the X-Men became his real body, while the George standing at the pyramid's exit became his mental form. He had his reasons for doing this. Making such a commotion would likely alert the Time Bureau soon, and he would need to use some clever tactics to cover it up. Thank you for your help, Professor X, now back in his wheelchair, looked at George with gratitude. He had just spoken with Eric and knew that George had saved Eric's wife and daughter. Based on the information available, he could deduce that George's actions were all for the sake of obtaining Apocalypse's abilities. However, he was still grateful to George. Regardless of George's motives, the fact remained that he had saved them and restored Cairo to its former state. This was not something a bad person would do. No need to thank me. I have my own purpose. I helped you because you are my friends in another universe. George approached Professor X and used his double hand technique on his knees. Another universe? Professor X looked puzzled, but his eyes widened quickly. I can feel my legs. With a push, he stood up from his wheelchair and discovered that he hadn't experienced the side effects of the drug Hank had created. His psychic abilities were still intact. My business is finished, and it's time for me to leave. Having healed Professor X's legs, George released Magneto's wife and daughter and prepared to return to his own universe. However, while drawing the portal, he also transmitted some images into the minds of Professor X and Magneto. This is what happened in my universe. I think if you don't cooperate and each stick to your own opinions, your universe might end up like this. Don't wait until mutants are extinct to regret it. Extinction of humanity is unacceptable, but blindly pandering to humanity is also self-destructive. My suggestion is that you demonstrate sufficient power to deter them. Humanity won't let enemies go just because they're subservient. They'll only retreat to protect themselves because of the enemy's strength. Of course, the final decision is up to you. I'm just offering advice. After saying this, he passed through the portal and returned to his Marvel universe in a high-profile manner. Professor X and Magneto represent two extremes. One harbors too many illusions about human nature, and the other harbors too much malice towards it. Peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants is impossible. Because this world can't be all good people. There will always be bad people, and few of those who reach the highest levels are truly kind. Even if Professor X and his team do everything right, saving humanity from countless crises. The higher-ups won't overlook the immense power mutants possess and the threat they pose. From humanity's perspective, it's not wrong. Professor X is a good person. But what if he dies? What if a powerful mutant leader emerges later, harboring a will towards humanity, like Magneto or Apocalypse? George's ability to lead the school of superpowers to peaceful coexistence with humanity isn't due to the good deeds of the school's superheroes. It's entirely because George is so powerful and vengeful, deterring the higher-ups from any malicious intent. They know that any attempt at sabotage will result in certain death. Their fear of George is paramount. Public iteration of superheroes is irrelevant. If the higher-ups want to eliminate someone, a little manipulation of public opinion can turn today's superhero into tomorrow's supervillain. Magneto's idea is equally flawed. Killing all humanity and leaving only mutants, is that enough? Mutants are still human, just with special abilities. They also scheme and fight tooth and nail for their own gain. Furthermore, who can guarantee that the children born from mutants will necessarily be mutants and awaken their abilities? What if they are born ordinary people? Should they be killed? Many mutants don't face rejection from family and friends, so if you kill their families, won't they seek revenge? Therefore, he personally believes that Professor X and Magneto could cooperate to establish a mutant kingdom. After using his brainwave amplifier, Professor X can freely control the will of any ordinary person in the world, and even instantly kill all ordinary people globally. This is far more deterrent than nuclear weapons. As long as humanity realizes that they dare to oppose the mutant empire, Professor X will kill all of humanity on Earth. He believes that the human leadership will not easily confront the mutant empire again. Among the human nations, those with nuclear weapons are not to be pushed too far, fearing a mutually destructive outcome. Crucially, Magneto is also effective against almost all of humanity's firearms. If both sides work together, even all of humanity's nations combined are no match, especially considering humanity's inherent disunity. He has given his suggestion. Whether Professor X and Magneto will heed it is their business. If they listened, his disguised teacher George would secretly help them, perhaps by using Apocalypse's abilities to enhance their strength. If they didn't listen, he wouldn't interfere, simply keeping a close watch on Phoenix and Scarlet Witch, trying to avoid detection by the Time Bureau, and slowly absorbing the Phoenix Force and Chaos Force. Once he had absorbed them all, he could then wander off to other parallel universes. After George left, Professor X and Magneto exchanged a glance, then simultaneously said, "It seems we should have a good talk." The images that had just flashed through their minds had greatly shocked them, and had significantly changed their original perceptions of humanity. Chapter 593 Communication between Intelligent People. In the floating city of the Superpower Academy, George's mental entity had barely returned when a portal to time appeared before him. The newcomer was none other than Fack, an elderly man nearing 60, responsible for this region under the Time Management Bureau. Mr. George, as we mentioned before, you cannot traverse the multiverse so freely, it will cause chaos. Old Fack didn't appear accusatory or ready to arrest him. Instead, he was all smiles and extremely friendly. How could he not be friendly? This man's strength was approaching that of dimensional demons. Even the Time Management Bureau couldn't force him. They couldn't very well eliminate this entire universe because of him. Even if he violated the new laws established by the Time Management Bureau and eliminated this universe, George, with his current strength, could easily escape. Therefore, they generally tried to appease him and explain the consequences. However, if the other party insisted on imposing the Time Management Bureau and causing destruction in various universes, then the Time Management Bureau wouldn't be easily deterred. The Time Management Bureau certainly possessed weapons capable of harming dimensional demons. "Oh, it's old Fack. Come, sit down and have some tea. We can talk things over." Since the Time Bureau officials were so friendly, George's attitude was naturally no less. He warmly pulled old Fack to sit down and conjured tea with a wave of his hand. "Actually, I have my reasons." Picking up his teacup, George let out a long sigh. Old Fack readily agreed, asking, "What happened?" "As you know, I sent all those people from the void back to their respective universes," George began to explain. Old Fack nodded. "I know about this. It was approved by the higher-ups. Those people were laid off before the management rules changed, and we won't lay them off arbitrarily now. Even if you don't send them back, we'll send them all back." There was one unexpected thing, which was the universe I just visited. George sighed. "I found that universe very similar to ours, like twins." thinking that if it continued to develop, it would become as desolate as ours. I couldn't help but want to help. Sometimes I am just too kind. I can't control myself. But don't worry, old Fack, this is a one-time thing. It definitely won't happen again. I absolutely believe Mr. George's words. This trip was on orders from my superiors, just routine business. I hope Mr. George won't take it personally. Since Mr. George has assured me, I'll immediately explain the situation to my superiors when I get back. Old Fack's lips twitched slightly, but he quickly recovered, waved his hand, and replied with an indifferent expression. He didn't believe a word of George's reasons. But it wasn't really important, since George hadn't caused any damage to that universe or killed anyone. Even Apocalypse was killed because he tried to take over a body, and he was going to die anyway. As long as George promised not to do it again, his mission would be complete. Then I'll have to trouble you, old Fack. If anything difficult happens in your jurisdiction, just come to me. George stood up and patted old Fack on the shoulder. He offered a way out, and old Fack accepted it. They were both smart people, so things were easier to resolve. The worst kind of person was the stubborn one who couldn't be reasoned with. Sometimes things are indeed troublesome to handle. If Mr. George is willing to help, that would be great. Hearing George's words, old Fack's eyes lit up. His biggest hope in coming here was to resolve this peacefully and not escalate the situation. He wanted to complete his mission without offending George. He hadn't expected that not only would things go as planned, but he would also gain something extra. With George's strength, he could basically handle all the troubles and difficult characters in all the universes under his jurisdiction. This would save him a lot of effort and prevent him from having headaches over these matters. After chatting for a while, old Fack returned to the Time Management Bureau, satisfied, while George also wore a broad smile. Although helping with some matters at the Time Management Bureau would waste some of his magic research time, maintaining a good relationship with old Fack meant that old Fack would turn a blind eye to many things, saving him a lot of trouble. Just like his original body left in another universe. Even if the Time Management Bureau hadn't noticed yet, it was only a matter of time before they did. Because even if he was just absorbing the power of the Phoenix and the power of chaos, it would change many things to some extent, and eventually the time management machine would give alerts. By examining the entire universe frame by frame, they would eventually find clues. Now that he had established a good relationship with old Fack and was helping him deal with those difficult figures, even if old Fack found clues hundreds of years later and discovered it was George, he would secretly suppress it. As long as he didn't cause too much trouble in that universe, there wouldn't be any major problems. Besides, helping old Fack deal with difficult characters from various universes wasn't necessarily a bad thing for him. While it took some time, it allowed him to obtain more coordinates from the Marvel Universe and even reap some benefits while helping. In another universe, Cairo, Egypt. After the battle, the group escorted the three horsemen of Apocalypse back to the school in a supersonic fighter jet. On the way back, George, the new teacher, naturally struck up a conversation with Professor X because he hadn't used his true appearance when meeting Magneto and Professor X. No one knew he was the mutant from another universe who had just killed Apocalypse. They simply assumed he was George, the new teacher applying for a position at the school. "Hello, George, welcome to our school, and thank you for your help." Professor X, no longer in a wheelchair, extended his hand to George, while simultaneously secretly probing his thoughts. He wouldn't casually pry into someone's memories or invade their privacy. However, he would use this superficial mental contact to obtain basic information and assess the other person's situation. For example, to obtain their name and age, and whether they harbored any ill will towards him or the school. The purpose of this was, of course, to prevent mutants with abnormal minds from becoming teachers at the school and corrupting his students. However, the moment his mind touched George, he was blocked by the same psychic ability. "You have psychic abilities too?" Professor X's face showed surprise. George smiled. "Yes, as I just said, I have many abilities, all kinds of them, including psychic abilities. But I can only read minds, not as powerful as the professor. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 594, Devouring the Phoenix Power. With so many abilities, you're already quite impressive? Professor X's face showed admiration. Why do you want to join our school? You can conjure money, you shouldn't be short of cash. I'm not short of money, but I lack kindred spirits. I lack people who don't see me as a freak. George shrugged. Professor X sighed upon hearing this, then comforted him. Don't worry, no one here will see you as a freak anymore. We're family here, and you'll be part of that family from now on. Freak, this is a nickname almost all mutants have. Because as long as you're a mutant, no matter what your abilities are, ordinary people will think you're a freak. Many students run away from home to come to the school because of this influence. Freak? That's just their jealousy of your talent. Never feel inferior because of your talent. Magneto, who had just comforted his wife and daughter, also came over after hearing the conversation. Professor X chuckled. Eric, never feel inferior because of your talents. We're on the same page about that, old friend. We are alike in every way except our attitude towards humanity, because our ultimate goal is to make life better for mutants. Magneto looked at George. I heard your ability is to transform anything. Could you conjure up a chessboard for us? Of course. George waved his hand, and a chessboard appeared before Magneto and Professor X. What a convenient ability. Magneto praised, then warned Professor X, don't read my mind. I don't need to read minds to play chess with you. You go first. Professor X held out his hand to Magneto. Magneto activated his ability, moving one of his pieces. I'll let you win. That's fair to you. Two terrible chess players. George watched for a while, then shook his head and walked away. Those first two sentences had made him think they were chess masters, but after watching for a while, he realized they were just two terrible players. Indeed, high intelligence doesn't necessarily mean good chess, and good chess doesn't necessarily mean high intelligence. And those terrible chess players really love playing chess, especially when their opponent is also a terrible player. Do you know why I don't play chess with them? Seeing George shake his head and walk over, Mystique, who was sitting there, smiled and said, I don't want to discourage them, so I always just watch them play. For her, it had been a long time since she had seen the two of them playing chess so happily together. The last time was in 1962, when they trained together at Charles's estate, now the mutant school, working together to fight the Black King. One was his brother who had raised him since childhood, always treating him like a younger sister. The other was his teacher and lover who helped him rebuild his confidence and taught him how to fight. Both were the people he loved most in the world. Okay, George smiled, not expecting this reason. He sat down next to Quicksilver and, seeing Quicksilver staring at Magneto, jokingly asked, when are you planning to tell him? I haven't decided yet. I want to find the right time. Quicksilver glanced at Magneto's wife and daughter behind him and replied hesitantly. George encouraged him, there's no right time for these things. The sooner you say it, the sooner you face it. That's true. I'll tell her when we get to school. Quicksilver secretly made up his mind. Changing the subject, George inquired about Wanda's situation. What does your sister do now? An elementary school teacher. She originally wanted to be a sitcom actress. Her favorite show when she was little was the Dick Van Dyke Show. Hearing that George was interested in his sister, Quicksilver immediately began to talk at length. Unfortunately, actors have too much exposure. She doesn't want to show her abilities anymore. Elementary school teachers deal with children. Even if she were accidentally discovered, no one would believe her. Besides, she really likes children, and so, while chatting with Quicksilver, the supersonic plane quickly returned to the mutant school. That night, after everyone had fallen asleep, George quietly went to Jean's room. Jean was lying in bed, her brow furrowed, seemingly having a nightmare. As her emotions fluctuated, a terrifying power was slowly awakening within her, surrounding her and gradually taking on the form of a phoenix. However, perhaps realizing that the energy within her was about to erupt, she tried her best to restrain herself and suppressed it. Is this the power of the phoenix? It is indeed powerful. I wonder if I can absorb it. George gently placed his hand on Kin's forehead and began to fully activate the 6 treasures immortal thief, absorbing the phoenix power within Kin's body. However, after a moment, his brows furrowed. So resistant, could it be? He knew that with his current level of the 6 treasures immortal thief, it would be difficult to absorb and refine all the phoenix power from Kin's body at once. So he wanted to take it slowly, absorbing a little each night and finishing it within a few months. But he didn't expect it to be even more difficult than he expected. It wasn't that he couldn't absorb it, but at this rate, it would take at least 20 years to completely absorb it. This far exceeded his original plan. Logically speaking, even if the phoenix power was strong, It shouldn't be this difficult to refine. After all, this was only a small portion of the Phoenix power within a universe, and his strength was not on the same level as Kin's. After thinking about it, he felt there was only one reason. That is, it wasn't just the Phoenix power resisting his absorption and refinement, Kin was also instinctively resisting. As the designated host of the Phoenix Force in every universe, if Kin subconsciously resists, the Phoenix Force's resistance will be greatly amplified. Therefore, if he wants to accelerate the absorption of the Phoenix Force, there are only two ways. One is to spend time researching and upgrading the 6 treasures Immortal Thief, greatly enhancing the intensity of its devouring and refining. The other is to find a way to open Kin's heart, making her lower her guard and give up resisting his devouring. Then I'll do both simultaneously, having used the 6 treasures Immortal Thief to devour all night, and seeing that dawn was approaching and Kin was about to wake up, George teleported away from the room. Opening Kin's heart and gaining her trust wasn't difficult. He was already a teacher at the school, and with more interaction, it wouldn't be a problem. The key was that Kin herself didn't want the Phoenix Force. As for strengthening the 6 treasures Immortal Thief, he already had some ideas. With his current strength, dealing with that black dragon wasn't too difficult, and the black dragon's talent was to devour all power. As long as he killed a black dragon and devoured it in its dragon crystal, the devouring power of his 6 treasures Immortal Thief would definitely receive a qualitative improvement. Chapter 595 Mentor George. Although it's only a little, the quality is really good. Teleporting back to his room, George couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Although he hadn't absorbed and refined much Phoenix Force in one night, the small amount he had refined was quite effective. He even felt that if he could refine all the Phoenix Force within Jean's body, even without refining Wanda's Chaos Force, it would definitely be enough for him to advance to the single universe level. The quality was clearly exceptional. At 7 in the morning, just after George finished breakfast in the school cafeteria, Professor X approached him for a private chat. "George, the school currently only has Hank and me as the main teachers, so we are responsible for many courses. Which subject are you best at?" The mutant school was relatively new, and it had been closed for several years due to military recruitment, so the students weren't yet old enough to be teachers. The main teachers had always been Professor X and Beast. Fortunately, both were well-rounded individuals, capable of handling virtually any subject. The school had a relatively large students' body from the beginning, which allowed it to survive. But things are different now. With the increasing number of mutant students, the two of them alone can no longer handle the workload, so they've started recruiting new teachers to share the course content. Because of my mental abilities, I'm quite good at psychological counseling. I studied this in college and became a psychologist after graduation. So, I want to guide students in psychology, solve their psychological problems, and become a mentor, George replied, his eyes darting around. If he could become a mentor and help Jean address her psychological issues, he could quickly build a closer relationship with her, lower her guard, and thus accelerate her absorption of the Phoenix Force. This was something he had planned before leaving home that morning. To prevent Professor X from discovering any flaws, he had specifically used the abilities he obtained from Apocalypse, combined with Misaka Mikado's electromagnetic intrusion into the internet, to create an incredibly convincing fake document for himself. Even if the CIA, FBI, and other agencies tried to access his information, they wouldn't be able to detect that the document was a forgery. The document did indeed contain his identity, along with all his experiences from childhood to adulthood, including his situation after becoming a psychologist. A mentor, Professor X hesitated upon hearing this. For other subjects, he would agree without hesitation, but when it came to psychological education, he couldn't make a decision so quickly. All the children attending the mutant school had some psychological issues due to their abilities. Some were less serious and could be resolved with a few talks, like Iceman and Fireman. Others were very serious, requiring talks almost every month or week, like Jean. He spent a lot of time each day providing psychological counseling to the children. If George could take on this work, it would make his life much easier, allowing him to focus on other issues. For example, Eric was still waiting for his specific answer regarding the establishment of a mutant empire. However, he wasn't entirely comfortable entrusting psychological counseling to George. This work was too important, mishandling it could potentially ruin a child. Actually, I have another ability. Stabilizing mutant abilities, allowing them to quickly master their powers and prevent them from going out of control. Seeing Professor X hesitate, George immediately raised his stakes again. He had now fully acquired all of Apocalypse's abilities, meaning he could develop a mutant's abilities to their limits at any time. It can enhance a mutant's potential, pushing their abilities to their limits, and naturally, it can also stabilize those abilities, allowing them to master them more quickly, or even perfectly. What? You can really make a mutant master their abilities quickly? Professor X's eyes widened immediately after hearing George's words, clearly very excited. How could he not be excited? The reason mutants are not accepted by society is not only because many people fear their power and worry that they will wipe out humanity, but also because their abilities are uncontrollable and pose a great danger, especially for those with powerful abilities. Very few mutants awaken their abilities at birth. Most mutants awaken their abilities at a certain age, perhaps in elementary, middle, or high school. Moreover, most awakenings occur when stimulated and experiencing significant emotional fluctuations. At this time, the abilities are often uncontrollable, and a mishap could harm loved ones and friends. If they are injured in the process, they might feel guilty at most, but if they are killed, the psychological impact is unimaginable. Normally, when mutant children enter the school, he would help them master their abilities through psychological counseling and the school's comprehensive training, or create special technological products to assist them in using their abilities. If George could directly stabilize the children's abilities, it would essentially solve most of their psychological problems and reduce the burden on the school. Yes, I haven't used it much before because I've encountered very few mutants. By the way, I should be able to help someone like Scott stabilize his abilities. George nodded and took the initiative to demonstrate by mentioning Cyclops, to prove his ability. Come with me for a moment. Professor X pulled George and ran towards the school classroom. Scott, upon reaching the classroom door, Professor X immediately beckoned Cyclops to come out. Beast and the students, who were in class, all showed curious expressions and stopped their lesson to gather around. George, give it a try. Professor X was full of anticipation. George didn't waste any more time and directly placed his hand on Cyclops' head, beginning to activate the ability he had obtained from Apocalypse. A moment later, he released his grip and smiled. All right, you can try taking off your glasses now. With Professor X's permission, Cyclops focused his gaze on a large tree in front of him and slowly removed his glasses. As the glasses were removed, no red energy shot from Cyclops' eyes. His eyes appeared no different from normal eyes. I feel like I can control the energy output freely. A look of surprise appeared on Cyclops' face. Then, with a thought, two beams of red light shot out, splitting the tree in two. After shooting, unlike usual, he didn't need to put on special glasses to stop. He simply blinked, and his eyes returned to normal. He could now perfectly control his abilities. Thank you, Professor George. George, from today onwards, you are the school's psychology professor. Responsible for helping children stabilize their abilities and addressing psychological issues. Professor X solemnly extended his right hand to George. Chapter 596 The Establishment of the Mutant Empire. X. George began helping everyone stabilize their abilities. This included Beast Hank, allowing him to switch freely between his normal human and beast forms without the need for drugs. Just as he was halfway through, the school's supersonic plane landed, and Magneto, controlling a fierce-looking, foul-mouthed Wolverine, stepped off the plane. Charles, I've brought back the history teacher you wanted. However, he seems to have amnesia, and you need to help him recover some of his memories. It turned out that after returning to the school, Professor X had examined Stryker's memories, thus learning about Wolverine's capture and transformation into Weapon X. It was Wolverine who traveled from the future to help them change history, so how could he stand by and watch Wolverine be captured? He immediately had Magneto and Mystique work together to infiltrate Stryker's base that night and rescue him, bringing him back to the school. Perfect timing. It would also fill the vacancy of the history teacher. Logan, relax. Professor X walked up to Wolverine, placed his hand on his forehead, and began helping Wolverine regain his lost memories. As Wolverine's memories slowly returned, his expression calmed down. While Professor X and Magneto were interacting with Wolverine, Jean Grey approached George. Professor George, can you help me? Compared to the damage her powers caused when they went out of control, the damage caused by other students' powers was child's play. When her powers first awakened, she made cars fly all over the street. Even after coming to the mutant school, with Professor X's help, her powers were somewhat under control, but occasionally, when they went out of control, they almost destroyed the entire school. So even within the mutant school, she was considered a freak by the other mutant students. Now, seeing that Professor George could actually stabilize and control everyone's powers, hope rose in her heart. Of course, George naturally reached out and placed his hand on Jean's head. Professor X, noticing George stabilizing Jean's powers, immediately turned his attention to them. He knew Jean possessed immense potential and power surpassing both him and Magneto, so he naturally valued her highly. If George could solve Jean's problem, that would be wonderful. Jean, your situation is a bit complicated. George feigned a frown, and the hope on Jean's face instantly vanished. But it's not unsolvable. With George's next words, hope returned to Jean's face. However, before she could ask, Professor X stepped forward and asked for her. What's going on, George? It's like this. I discovered two forces within Jean. One is a force generated by mutant genes, which I've stabilized, allowing her to control it freely. But there's another, more powerful force, one that doesn't originate from mutant genes and cannot be controlled, George patiently explained. Professor X suddenly understood. No wonder he always helped Jean with psychological counseling, but the forces within her were never fully under her control. It turned out there was another external force causing trouble. You just said you could resolve this. Yes, I have another ability to neutralize power, but the power within Jean is too strong. Completely neutralizing it might take a long time. I just don't know if Jean is willing to give up this power. George turned to look at Jean, who immediately nodded vigorously. Yes, I'm very willing, let alone that extra power. Even losing her mutant powers and becoming a completely ordinary person wouldn't be unacceptable to her. She had suffered from this power for far too long since childhood. Since you're willing, you must trust your teacher. Only if you trust your teacher enough and don't resist can your teacher more easily help you neutralize the power within you, allowing you to perfectly control your abilities. George patted Jean's head, and Jean nodded firmly. Now, things are almost settled with Jean. Trust isn't built with just a few words. But he believed that as long as Jean felt the Phoenix force within her gradually diminishing and its influence on her weakening, she would naturally trust him more and more. The more they trust him, the less resistance they face, and the more Phoenix force he absorbs, leading to a virtuous cycle of trust from Jean. Next up is Scarlet Witch Wanda. He couldn't put all his eggs in one basket. Absorbing Jean's Phoenix force would be enough to break through to the single universe level. But some things are uncertain. To be on the safe side, he felt he couldn't abandon Scarlet Witch's chaos force either. It had to be done simultaneously. He wouldn't complain about having too little power. That evening, in the mutant school's conference room, Professor X, Magneto, Beast, Shockwave, Mystique, Quicksilver, Wolverine, and George, along with all the adult mutants, sat together. Eric and I have discussed it. We've decided to formally establish a mutant empire, not just a school. We want to be equals with human nations, engaging in equal exchanges, so they'll never dare to arbitrarily capture mutants for experimentation again. Magneto immediately followed Professor X's words. If necessary, we must also reveal our weapons, letting human nations know that provoking us is no less serious than provoking a superpower with nuclear strike capabilities. Yes, he's right, but only if necessary. This time, Professor X didn't completely oppose Magneto, but nodded helplessly. Even after receiving the warning from that powerful being from another universe, he hadn't made up his mind, nor had he fully agreed to Magneto's mutant empire plan. It wasn't until he saw Stryker's memories, combined with the memories of Wolverine who had traveled back in time, that he understood. Perhaps the powerful being from another universe was right. Humanity could never fully accept mutants. In that case, there was no need to blindly appease humanity and obey human laws. Why not establish an empire belonging to mutants, create laws and regulations specific to mutants, and build a society for mutants? This way, mutant students, after graduation, wouldn't need to painstakingly hide their abilities and live as ordinary people. Instead, they could naturally enter a perfect society entirely built by mutants, earning a living using their knowledge and mutant abilities. I agree. George was the first to raise his hand in favor. This was exactly the outcome he wanted. If it really came to fruition, he wouldn't mind helping further, not only stabilizing the students' abilities but also helping them develop them, greatly increasing the strength of the mutant empire. Chapter 597 Wanda Without a Boyfriend. Agreed. After George raised his hand in agreement, the others thought for a moment and then followed suit. Almost all of them had experienced persecution by humans, and the purpose in coming to the mutant school was to escape human harm. Therefore, they naturally wouldn't object to the proposal. Seeing the unanimous approval, Professor X wasn't surprised and immediately explained his and Magneto's plan. Next, I will use the Xavier family's wealth to buy a deserted island, and after its construction, it will become the territory of the Empire. Then, using the brainwave amplifier, I will notify the presidents of various countries of the official establishment of the Mutant Empire. After confirming and reaching an agreement with the presidents of various countries, I have decided to publicly announce the existence of the Mutant Empire worldwide and call on all mutants to join the Empire. After the meeting, George asked Quicksilver, "Did you talk to him?" "Yes, he apologized to me and hoped to fulfill some of his responsibilities as a father," Quicksilver sighed. Actually, he knew that Magneto couldn't be entirely blamed for this. His mother and Magneto had only met in a bar, and after a one-night stand, she unexpectedly became pregnant. However, his mother didn't choose to abort. Instead, she gave birth to them. Magneto, back then, was a hitman searching for revenge against the Black King, completely unaware that someone had borne him 2 children. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so indifferent. Even now, he hasn't thought about how Magneto should fulfill his responsibilities as a father. He just wants a father. "So, what are your plans next?" George asked again. Quicksilver thought for a moment. The professor said he's forming the X-Men Defense Force to protect the Mutant Empire. "I can't be a teacher, so I plan to join the Defense Force. I need to go back and discuss this with my mother, and also tell her about my father. Wanda has the right to know too." "That's true. Since your sister is an elementary school teacher, I think she should become a teacher here like me. That way, she won't be afraid of exposing her abilities, and she won't have to feel inferior about them anymore. I can also help her stabilize her abilities." George wanted Scarlet Witch to be a teacher at the mutant school, of course, so that, like Jean, it would be easier to absorb the chaos force within Scarlet Witch. Quicksilver's eyes lit up immediately. That makes sense. With Wanda at school, Mom won't have to worry about me getting into trouble anymore. He then put his arm around George's neck. "Are you free? Come with me to my house." "Sure, let's go together." George didn't refuse. Quicksilver reached out to press his hand against George's neck, afraid he might twist it if he ran too fast. But George raised his hand to stop him. "No need, I left a mark on you. Once you get there, I can teleport to your side based on the mark, an ability similar to Nightcrawler." Quicksilver gave George another thumbs up. "Impressive. How many abilities do you have?" "Just some minor support abilities, nothing special." George smiled and waved his hand. Quicksilver flashed, entered super speed mode, and sprinted towards his house. A few minutes later, George also teleported away. Florida, the Maximoff family home. Quicksilver stopped at the doorway, looking around. He quickly spotted George appearing out of nowhere behind him. "Looks like even if I run fast, I can't outrun you. Perfect timing. Go pick up Wanda for me. I reckon I'll have to talk to Mom for a while before she'll agree to let me join the Guardians." "Which school does she go to?" George nodded. Meeting Wanda alone would be a good opportunity to test the Chaos Force within her. Unlike Jean's Phoenix Force, Wanda's Chaos Force had a master. He wasn't sure if absorbing the Chaos Force would offend the Dark God, Sithin, behind it. Actually, he wasn't afraid even if he did. Although Sithin was a top-tier multiverse-level Dark God, he was also a universally hated figure in Marvel, and dared not reveal his true form. He could only develop representatives in various universes, like Wanda in each universe. Or he could project some dark books to tempt humanity. At most, the projected power wouldn't exceed the level of a single universe. Monty Elementary School, just walk straight for 6 kilometers along this road and you'll see it. Quicksilver blinked, and in a flash, he was inside the house. The first thing he did was call his sister, Wanda. "Wanda, a friend of mine is coming to pick you up in a bit. His name is George. I have something important to tell you." "Pietro, where have you been these past few days? You forgot? I told you I wasn't at school today. I took the day off to attend a class reunion," Wanda replied irritably on the other end of the line. She was also quite annoyed by her irresponsible brother. Hearing this, Quicksilver ran out of the house, only to find George was no longer at the door. "Okay, it's alright, he'll find you anyway. I told you, I found her biological father, and he wants to see you. Mom's back. We'll talk in detail when you get back." I'll talk to Mom first. Quicksilver knew George had the ability to find people. Even if he couldn't find Wanda at school, he could find her using his ability, so he wasn't worried. Found Father. Wanda, dressed in a red dress, froze when Quicksilver hung up the phone. She had never known who her biological father was, and she never expected her unreliable brother Pietro to have found him. But she quickly recovered. Damn it, I didn't even tell him where this place is. How did his friend find me? Oh well, I'll take a taxi back and find out what's going on. For her, figuring out who her father was far more important than a class reunion, especially since class reunions these days had lost their original meaning. If she hadn't felt embarrassed to refuse, she really wouldn't have wanted to attend. Back in school, everyone liked to tease her for being a weirdo. Excuse me, I have to go now. Back in the restaurant's private room, Wanda grabbed her small purse and prepared to leave. However, before she could finish speaking, a blonde woman interjected. Wanda, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Going to see your boyfriend? Boyfriend? Wanda doesn't have a boyfriend. Mike from our class, we only dated for a day before breaking up. He kept saying Wanda was a witch, and he didn't even dare to come to this party. Have you forgotten? Another brown-haired, freckled-faced woman immediately shouted, then burst into laughter along with a blonde. Wanda had originally been a nobody in their class, but now that she'd grown up, with a stunning figure and looks, the male classmates' eyes were practically glued to her at the reunion, which made some of the female classmates very resentful. That's why they always brought up things from high school to tease Wanda. Chapter 598 The Cliched Hero Saves the Beauty. Wanda's hand flashed red, but she quickly suppressed her anger and forced a smile. You don't need to worry about that. She turned to leave the private room, but was quickly stopped by a man in a floral suit. The man didn't say anything sarcastic. Instead, he pointed to the window and said with a gentlemanly expression, Wanda, it's raining outside. It'll be hard to get a taxi. How about I drive you home? No need. Wanda refused outright. This male classmate opposite her came from a well-off family and was a school bully in school, often leading the jeers and insults against her, calling her a freak. Now, seemingly offering to take her home out of kindness, he actually just wanted to sleep with her. She was naive, but not stupid. Wanda, you always reject people's kindness like this. It'll be hard for you to fit in. People who can't fit in are called freaks. If you want to get rid of that label, you have to learn to change. Why don't you come to my house? I'll give you a good talk about how to integrate with everyone. I'm very good at that. The boy in the floral suit reached out and ruffled Wanda's hair, his eyes flashing with a seductive light, convinced he was incredibly charming. Meanwhile, the veins on Wanda's forehead were practically bulging. She really wanted to use her powers to teach these guys a lesson, but she held back. If she caused an accident, the burden on her family would increase even more. Her mother had already struggled to raise her and her brother alone. They had finally found a good stepfather, but he died in an accident shortly after her sister was born. Her brother was unreliable, often stealing and getting into trouble with the police, and he was unemployed. Her sister was now in middle school, a little rebellious, making the family expenses even greater. If she revealed her powers and lost her job, her mother would have to support the whole family again. Just bear with it. This isn't the first time this has happened. As long as I keep refusing, they won't really do anything to me. At most, they'll mock me a bit more, then let me leave. I shouldn't have listened to Haley and come to the STEM class reunion. She turned to look at Haley sitting inside, who lowered her head guiltily. Haley was one of the few classmates she was on good terms with. She never attended class reunions before, but this time, Haley kept begging her to come. Now she understood. Haley had invited her to divert attention. Because she didn't come, Haley became the last one standing, the object of everyone's ridicule and mockery. These guys, they really don't know what's good for them. George, above the restaurant, couldn't help but sneer. After failing to find Wanda at the school, he used magic to locate her, arriving above the restaurant and seeing everything happening in the private room below. Besides her mutant abilities, Wanda also possessed the power of chaos, which had an interesting nickname, the power of my thoughts. What this means is that if Wanda could perfectly utilize the power of chaos, she could have whatever she wanted, and the world could be whatever she wanted it to be. The power of chaos can easily alter reality. In one universe, Wanda simply said, there shouldn't be mutants in this world, and 98% of the mutants in that universe disappeared. So even though Wanda is currently holding back her power, if she were constantly thinking about her classmates dying? They might all die in various accidents later. As one of the three ancient powers, a multiverse-level energy, it's no joke. It's only because Wanda can't fully control the power of chaos within her right now, and because she's kind-hearted and doesn't have overly extreme thoughts, that nothing bad has happened. Alright, perfect for boosting my favorability rating. George instantly teleported to the door of the private room, changing his clothes into a custom-made suit like Tony Stark's, along with a watch and other accessories of the same brand. While the hero rescuing the damsel in distress is cliché, it undeniably increases a girl's favorability towards you. If the girl is love-struck and inexperienced, she might just offer herself to him. Of course, the premise is that you can't be too ugly, otherwise it won't be offering yourself, but rather repaying in the next life. He needs to devour the chaotic power within Wanda, just like with a liar. The more the other person trusts him, the less resistance they will have, and the easier it is to devour them. Given his personality, even without this opportunity, he would create some other events to increase Wanda's trust in him. It just doesn't have to be a hero saving the damsel in distress. There are many ways to increase trust, and the hero saving the damsel in distress was just something he happened to do on a whim. Excuse me. Pushing open the door of the private room, George strode up to the bewildered Wanda, took her small hand, and said gently, "I told you, it's raining today. I offered to bring you here, but you insisted on taking a taxi yourself, worried that it would be too high profile and embarrass your classmates. How could that be? Your classmates aren't the petty kind of people." Before Wanda could speak, George turned to the male classmate in the floral suit next to him and extended his hand. "Hi, I'm Wanda's boyfriend, George." Wanda, who had initially wanted to deny it, suddenly remembered her brother mentioning on the phone that a friend named George would be picking her up. She instantly understood that George was helping her out. The boy in the floral suit glanced at George, then his pupils constricted sharply, and his expression immediately became very friendly. "Hi, I'm Bob, Wanda's classmate." His family was also quite wealthy, so he had some insight. Wanda's boyfriend, from head to toe, was no ordinary person. His watch alone was worth more than his most expensive sports car. Such a person definitely had a powerful background and wasn't someone he could easily offend. The other classmates sitting there also had changing expressions. Some were suspicious, some envious, some jealous, and some even gritted their teeth. They couldn't believe that Wanda, this oddball, had found such a rich and handsome boyfriend. Bob and George's hands clasped together, and suddenly a scream rang out. He immediately pulled his hand away in pain, but because he pulled too fast, he lost his balance and slammed his body onto the table behind him. The table flipped over, sending drinks and dishes flying, hitting each of the students sitting there squarely on the head. "Sorry, I've been working out a lot lately, and I used a bit too much force. I couldn't control myself," George said perfunctorily, turning to Wanda with a smile. "Let's go. Your brother is waiting for us at home." "Thank you." Wanda chuckled at the disheveled students and pulled George out of the private room. Chapter 599 The Shortcut to Devouring the Power of Chaos. "Fuck, don't go." Bob, the student, scrambled to his feet, clutching his seemingly fractured right hand, and angrily chased after George and Wanda. George's background was probably not simple. He didn't want to offend them for a woman, but having been bullied like this, with a broken hand, how could he possibly swallow his anger? The other students stood up, brushing the leftover food off their clothes. Seeing Bob chase after them, they followed, hoping for a good show. However, when they reached the restaurant entrance, they saw Bob standing there blankly, looking up in terror. They followed Bob's gaze and froze as well. Above the restaurant, 6 armed helicopters were hovering, their machine guns pointed directly at the entrance, seemingly ready to fire and riddle them with bullets at any moment. George and Wanda were slowly ascending in one of the helicopters, looking down at them as if they were ants. Finally, the 6 armed helicopters quickly disappeared from their sight. Who exactly is Wanda's boyfriend? On the helicopter, Wanda looked at George with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. "You're my brother's friend." Her brother was always up to no good. When did he make such a high-status friend? Could it be that he stole some state secrets and the military came looking for him? Yes, he's a friend. George waved his hand, and the 6 helicopters vanished instantly. He picked up Wanda and teleported directly to their front door. "Don't worry, we're all the same kind of people. Those were just things I conjured with my powers, the same kind of people." The helicopters disappeared, and then they teleported to their front door, Wanda was clearly still confused. George rang the doorbell and explained, "Yes, we're all mutants. You should have seen it on the news. I'm a teacher at the mutant school, and your brother is a member of the mutant school's guard team. He came here this time." After hearing George's explanation, Wanda finally understood what was going on, her face filled with surprise. Pietro actually participated in saving the world. In her memory, her brother Pietro was a loser who only caused trouble for the family and liked to steal things. Unexpectedly, he knew so many important figures and even participated in yesterday's world-saving event in Cairo, Egypt. "Good afternoon, my sister." The doorbell had barely rung when Quicksilver quickly opened the door and greeted his sister, Wanda. Then came the Maximoff family meeting. The process was somewhat heated, but Pietro and Wanda's mother ultimately agreed to let the siblings join the mutant empire and work with their biological father, Magneto. On one hand, Magneto was, after all, the father of their two children, and as they grew older, she couldn't keep them from seeing their father forever. On the other hand, as mutants, Pietro and Wanda simply couldn't live a proper life in ordinary society. Pietro spent all his time hiding in the basement, his only pleasures being playing video games and occasionally sneaking out to steal things. Over the years, he had become a complete loser, unable to even find a girlfriend. Wanda, although a primary school teacher, was also unhappy due to her uncontrollable abilities and psychological issues, and dared not have a boyfriend. She knew that he often endured things for the sake of his family. By joining the mutant empire, the two would at least be surrounded by their own kind, able to live freely and realize their own value. Crucially, it wasn't like they'd never see each other again. "Let's go." After Pietro and Wanda packed their things and said goodbye to their mother and sister, George teleported them back to the mutant school. A month later, on a small island in the Atlantic Ocean, the mutant empire was officially established. Professor X used his brainwave amplifier to announce the existence of the mutant empire to the entire Earth and invited all mutants to live there. At the same time, he demonstrated to the leaders of various human nations what it meant to put all high-ranking officials to sleep for an hour in a second and to alter the Earth's magnetic field. This made it clear to the leaders of various nations that the mutant empire possessed terrifying destructive power, surpassing nuclear weapons. Naturally, this involved various negotiations, maneuvering, and all sorts of conspiracies. However, Professor X and Magneto handled those. George simply focused on being a mental health mentor at the Empire School, developing student stabilizing abilities and addressing their psychological issues. Most importantly, he was slowly absorbing the Phoenix Force and the Chaos Force. 2 months later, early morning, George drew back the curtains, and bright sunlight streamed into the large bed in the room. A pair of jade-like arms slowly emerged from under the covers. After finding George, she grabbed his hands and pulled him back onto the bed. "It's the weekend, no classes, I'll sleep a little longer," a lazy voice came from under the covers. She had stayed up until the early hours of the morning yesterday, and was still completely exhausted, not wanting to get up at all. "You said it." George skillfully slipped under the covers, his red hand activated, and Wanda's hands emerged from under the covers, gripping the sheets tightly, trying hard not to make too much noise so the neighbors wouldn't hear. "I meant just sleeping, not, because of the good impression she made at the beginning." Coupled with George's psychic abilities, Wanda's affection for George had skyrocketed over the past 2 months. At a school dance, after drinking, the two, well, you know. And it was then that George discovered a problem. When Wanda was emotionally aroused, the difficulty of absorbing chaos power was greatly reduced. This kind of excitement refers to the euphoria generated through primal physical activity and the resulting mental and physical pleasure. The longer one remains in this state, the easier it is to absorb the power of chaos. Therefore, whenever he had the chance, George would drag Wanda along to try various things, essentially trying every drink imaginable. Many of these attempts even went beyond what a normal person could experience, requiring magical assistance. I won't go into details here, as it might cause problems. Because of this, he has currently absorbed far more chaotic power than the Phoenix Force. He had considered using the same method on Jean Grey. However, as a teacher, it wouldn't be right to target Jean Grey. Moreover, he was currently focused on Wanda. Dealing with two at the same time would be too much for him. Physically, it wasn't a problem. With his physique surpassing that of a dragon, he could remain vigorous even after 7 days and nights, let alone 7. The main issue is indigestion. simultaneously absorbing two such powerful forces. Digesting and converting them into his own power required time to adapt. He didn't have any feelings for Jean either. He was only with Wanda for the power of chaos, but also because he did develop some feelings for her while they were together. Chapter 600: The Plan to Open the Gate of the Solar Eclipse. In the fairy tale world, on Tenrau Island, at the doorway of a cozy house, the celestial spirit realm is a magical place. Just as celestial spirits cannot stay in the human world for long without a contract with a human, humans cannot stay in the celestial spirit realm for long without wearing celestial spirit realm clothing. Moreover, one day in the celestial spirit realm is equivalent to 100 days in the human world. I used this principle to create the Eclipse Gate. Zareth sat cross-legged at the coffee table, sipping tea as he explained his design and principles for creating the Eclipse Gate to George. Therefore, if you can't gather all 12 celestial spirit keys at a specific time, you need extremely powerful individual strength and time magic to activate the Eclipse Gate with the help of the celestial spirit realm's power. It seems that the small world might need to be more perfect, and the power level needs to be higher, to have a chance to open the Eclipse Gate earlier. Hearing Zareth's words, George, leaning on the coffee table, already had a plan. He wanted to use the Eclipse Gate to release 10,000 dragons from the past, devour them all, gather all the elemental dragon slayer magic, and become an all-powerful dragon slayer mage. Unfortunately, the Eclipse Gate still has 5 years to go before it opens, even though he has already obtained the 12 golden Protus keys for Lucy. To open the Eclipse Gate ahead of time, as its creator Zareth said, one must possess extremely powerful individual strength and a profound mastery of time magic. Time magic isn't a problem, his current level in time magic is quite good. As for power comparable to that of the Protus realm, he tried it out, and while he's still a bit lacking, the gap isn't too large. Then let's deal with the Black Dragon first and obtain the devouring magic, since he can't yet devour 10,000 dragons to obtain the omnipotent dragon slayer magic. Devouring the Black Dragon to obtain the devouring magic and enhance the devouring effect of the 6 treasures. Immortal Thief is a good idea. This will help his main world self better absorb the Phoenix Force and Chaos Force. This way, his main body's strength will increase, and perhaps it won't be long before he can close the gap and forcefully open the Eclipse Gate on his own. In fact, considering his journey from transmigrating to the Marvel world to creating various world clones, from a level 2 mutant clone to the peak of the celestial level, he's infinitely close to the single universe level. His overall strength is even capable of fighting against a typical single universe level being. In less than 6 years, his strength had increased dramatically. Due to the cumulative power of his various cosmic avatars and his own diligent efforts to constantly seek opportunities to enhance his abilities, his growth was incredibly rapid, practically exponential. It only began to plateau after reaching the peak of the Heavenly Father level. Or rather, it wasn't a plateau. Although he was at the peak of the Heavenly Father level, his strength continued to grow, just without breaking through to the single universe level. Even now, he could easily defeat several versions of himself from a few months ago. Initially, he was indeed somewhat impatient, but he gradually came to terms with it. A little reflection revealed that the leap from the Heavenly Father level to the single universe level was a massive leap. Not even comparable. It was like the difference between a mortal and an immortal. You start as a mortal, then progress through body refinement, foundation establishment, golden core, nascent soul, deity transformation, void refinement, deo integration, and tribulation transcending. Only after transcending the tribulation can one become an immortal. Countless cultivators enter the first 8 stages, each stage losing a significant number of people, with fewer and fewer as you progress. And reaching the point of transcending the tribulation to become an immortal is extremely difficult. The same applies to the leap from the Heavenly Father level to the single universe level. At the Heavenly Father level, you're still within a universe, a being within that universe. At the single universe level, you can transcend that universe. Or, even more powerful, you possess your own dimension, becoming a creator, a self-contained entity. Therefore, to reach the single universe level, he needs patience, constantly accumulating strength, increasing power, and building a solid foundation. Only then can he break through this barrier and completely complete the leap in the essence of life. Devouring black dragons, devouring 10,000 dragons, devouring the power of the phoenix and the power of chaos, studying the magic of various worlds, comprehending the true meaning of various magics and the laws of the world, to perfect his small world, All of this is preparation for breaking through to the single universe level and possessing his own complete dimensional world. Only through deep accumulation can one unleash its full potential. Geoff, George, try my newly invented dessert. Mavis flew out of the house carrying 2 plates containing 2 unidentified lumps of paste, followed by the dusty-faced Magic King. Oh, I still have some things to take care of at the guild, so I'll be going now. George's expression changed upon seeing this, and he instantly teleported away, leaving Geoff with a green face. Mavis, gifted in magic, was utterly terrible at cooking. The key was that, just like her love for innovating magic, she also particularly loved creating all sorts of new dishes and desserts that had never existed before. This proved one thing: many recipes that hadn't appeared before weren't because past chefs hadn't discovered them, but because they were outdated products. Since Geoff and Mavis had been living together, George noticed that the frequency of Geoff's curse attacks had decreased significantly. "Guildmaster, you're back," Mira Jane greeted George happily upon seeing him in the guild. George transformed from his cat form into human form, hugged Mira Jane, and kissed her. "Has anything happened at the guild lately?" Everyone has desires, and with prolonged interaction, feelings inevitably develop. Because he spent most of his time researching magic, George hadn't wasted time actively seeking out anyone for romance. Furthermore, neither his main body nor his clones are single. Their thoughts are originally singular, only divided as they control different bodies. If one enjoys the experience, the others feel the same way, and he doesn't feel empty. But his lack of initiative doesn't mean others don't. As the guild leader, leading the guild through numerous difficulties, his mature thinking and powerful strength make it hard not to attract female mages. If he had always been in cat form, it would have been fine. But since he mastered perfect transformation, he often interacts with everyone in human form. Over time, Mira Jane, who had the most contact with him, naturally fell in love with him. Since someone took the initiative to throw themselves at him, and he wasn't exactly a saint, he naturally accepted, and they got together. Natsu and the others accidentally destroyed half of Agalfa City during their S-rank mission, Mira Jane reported, releasing George. However, the guild has sent several members with repair magic to help with the repairs. It should be fixed in about 2 weeks. Forget it, I'll go myself. In 2 weeks, the Magic Council will probably be sending out another complaint. George rubbed his forehead. These guys are useless at finding spellbooks for me. They're number 1 at causing trouble. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.